Yo, my guys, what's up? How are we all doing? So nice to have you all here. I can see people are still kind of streaming in. Some of you were already here super early. Some of you were discussing your brother's in infectious feet, I think. So it's nice to see that we're all getting ready to crack on with this evening's cram course. I'm just going to kind of talk for a little bit, just so that you can see that I'm here, so that I can see that you are here. Um, we're also going to be giving a little bit kind of an overview of what tonight's going to involve. And as I talk, obviously, more and more people will kind of trickle in as things get started. So, hoping that you can all see me, you can all hear me. My mic says that I'm picking up sound, so if you can't hear me, check your volume, potentially refresh the stream. I can see myself on the camera, so things are looking hopefully all good. Um, yep, cool. Hi, hi, hi to those of you saying hello, bonjour, hola, ¿qué tal? HBiz has got a question already before we even get started. So I spelled a word wrong in my exam. Is it fine? I didn't repeat. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't be too bothered about that. It's one word out of, probably close to 1,000 that you wrote in that whole piece. So wouldn't worry about it too much. Cherno J, I'm so ready. I just need a walkthrough. That's what we got tonight. Glad to hear that you are ready to absolutely smash it tomorrow. Okay, so lots of you I know have been here before. You've done the previous three cram courses. But for those of you who are new, I am going to talk you through basically what this looks like. Africa has just asked what exam board this is. This is for AQA specifically. However, if you are with other exam boards, the same skills will be relevant. And for the writing section, everything except EdXL does the same kind of core content for that as well. So A Ultimate, I remember you. Is Lang paper 2 harder than 1? Yeah, probably, because there's two texts and people struggle more with non-fiction than they do with fiction. But yeah. Gabe is saying, sir, if you didn't write your name in block capitals at the start, will you get your paper marked still? Yeah, because you would have put your candidate number on there as well. Your name isn't really all that relevant, to be honest. Um, yeah, so I wouldn't worry about that too much, Gabe. Okay, so for those of you who are brand new, like I said, this is today's goal. We're going to help you revise for tomorrow's English language paper 2 exam by completing a full paper live. So I'm going to talk you through what the questions look like, how to approach thinking about them first, how to plan, and kind of what you should be including in each of your questions. So hopefully all the things that you need should be covered tonight. But I'm also going to slot in several opportunities for you to ask me questions where I should be able to kind of take a bit of time to answer all of those. Okay. The way that you're going to be, oh no, here's me. Like I said, most of you have been at some of the previous cram courses. I recognise your display names, but for those of you who haven't, I'm Louis Provis. Gonna throw the CV at you, just so you know that what I'm giving you tonight is obviously valuable information from an expert. I'm not just some random guy they pulled off the street, okay? So I'm Louis Provis, Head of English here at My Headspace. I am a fully qualified English teacher. I've spent over 10 years teaching English in classrooms up and down the country. Before I did that, I studied English at Oxford and Cambridge. I've got a master's from both of those, and I've been working alongside exam boards, including AQA, for the last 9 years of my teaching career, marking for those exam boards during my summer holidays. So when I talk to you tonight, hopefully you should be able to trust what it is that I say. It's not just pulled out of off the top of my head, you know. Okay. Someone's just said, are you going to tell us how to structure each question? Yeah, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to talk to you about how to approach each of the questions. What's the workout routine? It is all the lifts, all the time, every day. See if you can keep up. Okay, so let's crack on. The way that you are going to be getting involved tonight, guys, it's the Q. Q stands for C, U, E. So I'm going to ask you to complete the workbook. If you haven't got the workbook, you can see that it's been pinned to the top of the chat, the workbook link. If you download it, you have it in a, you can have it open on a tablet, or you can have it printed if you've had an opportunity to. That would be great. You're going to complete the workbook just so you've got notes, just so you've had a go at practicing the day before the exam. It's entirely up to you how much of the workbook you complete. I recommend that it's an opportunity to, like I said, practice, to annotate, to get some good work into your books, all that jazz. But it's up to you how much you do. By the time you get to this point, I know lots of you are thinking, I just need to kind of see it being done live. I want to just sit back and absorb it. I've already had a long day at school or revising or whatever. That's absolutely fine. But the workbook is there just to support you. It's also got all of the slides in, so that if something isn't quite as clear as it could be on the screen, you've also got it in front of you. So hopefully that's useful. The second thing is going to be use the chat function. So lots of you are doing it already. As I said, I do try and answer questions as they go on, but there will be specific slots where I'll answer extended questions. If you've got kind of like quite short questions, if you just chuck them into the chat, if I miss them, ask them again during the Q&A session, because that's when I'm going to dedicate some actual time to it. I won't be able to pause for every single question. Yeah, for those of you asking about how long this is live, so it's going to go on until 8 o'clock, potentially a bit later if there's still more to cover. And in terms of access, you can access it as soon as it finishes. It's recorded, so you can watch it back, anything you missed. If you had to pop out to go to the toilet or have your dinner or whatever, then you can obviously rewatch it afterwards. And then finally, like I said, engage in the Q&A. To make that your opportunity to ask the questions. Oh, and I do just have to say, you guys are already being very respectful to each other already. But if we can continue with the general respect, my mods can just enjoy the show and just keep an eye on you. We're not going to be having any kind of conflict. That would be really good. Thank you. Am I going to cover a whole paper? Yep, I'm going to cover a whole paper 2 from start to finish, every question. And yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Are we all happy with that? Hopefully. Okay, so quick pop quiz. When you're answering these questions into the chat, can you please put the number before you answer the question? So if you want to answer question 5, say 5 and then the number of marks available for that writing section. So just throw at me into the chat. You can also fill it in your workbook. I'd probably recommend doing that after we've done a bit of feedback. These key things to have just an overall awareness of the paper before we go into the getting stuck into the details. Yeah. So May Sullivan is saying that number 1, 50%. It is 50% of your GCSE. Cool. H Beers is saying that question 2, how long is the exam? Saying an hour and 45. Cool. Question 3. Charlie is saying 80. How many marks is it total? Nice. Someone's saying for question 8, what should you do first? Read extract A. Nice. I'm not saying whether these are right or wrong, by the way, but no one's been wrong yet with the ones that I've called out. What else? Nice. Interesting. Louis suggesting doing question 5 first. We'll come to that as an idea. Someone's saying 40 for reading, 40 for writing. Yes, A Ultimate. I think I remember your handle. Anyone want to answer questions that haven't been answered yet? It seems like most of you know the papers pretty well. I haven't seen many wrong answers. Question 5, someone saying 40. Yep, nice. Anyone want to have a go at answering question 7? How long should you spend per mark? And the harder questions of which assess those mark schemes. Tahir, can't lie, I don't even know the timings, they're just right. Fair enough. I mean, as long as you don't run out of time, if you've done that in the mocks and you haven't run out of time, then it should be fine. How similar is AQA to EDUCAS, an English language component 2? It's pretty similar. So the last school that I taught in was EDUCAS, and it's a pretty similar paper. The same skills are assessed. essentially. Gabe itches. What grade would you roughly get if you got full marks on question 5 but low marks on the other questions? So you could get obviously 40 marks there. Do you like low marks, like 2 or 3 marks throughout the paper? So 45 out of 80. You're looking at probably a grade 4, even if it's a grade 9 response for the writing. So yeah, I wouldn't I wouldn't just dedicate all your time to part B unless you're just aiming for a pass. Okay, Louis Thompson, I'm so stressed. Can I ever finish a test in time? Literally always run out of time. Um, I would write down on the front of your paper the timings, recommended timings for yourself, and when you get to each of those timestamps for each individual question, just move on to that question. You can come back to it, obviously, and that's fine. Okay. Oh, I see people enjoying me reading out the name of Gabe, Mr. Itches. Yeah, guys, deal with it. If you can't handle the entirety of the English language, then you're going to struggle with this paper. Okay, so boom, here are the marks that I was looking for. So first one, it is 50% of your GCSE. Some of you might be thinking about how the fact that you've got your spoken language endorsement. That is part of it, obviously, but it's separate. It's marked separately. You could get a grade 9 in your written exams and fail the spoken language assessment and still get your 9. So yeah. How long is the exam? Yes, it is 1 hour 45 minutes. Someone said that already. 80 marks, which is 40 and 40. So notice that I would recommend allocating 15 minutes to mark section A, meaning, to annotate section A, meaning that you've got basically an hour on the first section because annotating takes so long when you have 2 texts. Yeah. Yeah. I know you can thank your parents for that definitely real name. Um, love it. Anyway, yeah, so section B, recommending 35 to 40 minutes of actual writing with 5 to 10 minutes of planning. Okay, so you can determine whether you think it's going to be 40 minutes of writing and 5 minutes of planning, or 35 minutes of writing and 10 minutes of planning, depending on how much help you would need with planning. Yeah. Someone saying about different paper timings. If you're on a different exam board, then it might be different. Yeah, so obviously some exam boards go, well, there's two texts that you're looking at, therefore you're going to have more time to answer the questions. AQA decides to make both the papers the same length. I'm not quite sure why, because fact of the matter is, you've got in the literature half, you've got 1 hour, one exam that's longer than the other, but for language they decide to make it equal. Couple of people saying, can you repeat analysis in question 3 and 4? Yeah, so different examiners will be marking your different questions in the exam, so it won't be the same examiner. Therefore, if you have some analysis that you've used on question 3 that ends up in question 4 when you're doing comparison, it's not a problem. I mean, I wouldn't recommend just doing the exact same stuff, but if you've got similar ideas, if you're still actually using them as part of your comparison, then I wouldn't worry about it too much. Someone's got some biryani cooking. I'm jealous. How many times should I read the text, as it takes me ages to read them? If it takes you a long time to read them, I would read them once and read them with purpose, so when you're annotating as you go. Some people not like an AQA. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, 1 minute per mark-ish in terms of actual writing. Yeah. What should you do first? Read and highlight, allocate and annotate. Okay, so I'll explain what that means in a minute. AO3 is only assessed on question 4, where you're doing comparison, It's not on question 2 because that is just synthesis, which is much simpler. Okay, it's a much simpler skill. And then which questions assess AO5 and AO6 writing skills? Obviously, it's question 5, section B. Easy peasy, okay? Hopefully we're happy with that. The main reason that we do this, by the way, just to give an overview of the exam, is to make sure, number one, everyone's on the right stream so they know that they're doing the same exam tomorrow. Number two, so that we can gain confidence because everybody knows that everybody knows enough about the paper to be cracking on with, but also to give people time to kind of join the stream before we get cracking, okay? A couple of people asking questions. Gabe is saying, do you suggest starting from back to front? I don't know. It doesn't tend to serve people very well to do it that way around. Rust, what did you get in GCSEs or O levels, depending on which you did? I did GCSEs, and I got 13 A stars and an A in drama. What else? What are people saying? Do I need to know terms like metaphors and stuff? Because it's non-fiction writing, you may have the occasional the metaphor and simile and personification, that kind of stuff coming up. It would be less common than you would have in the paper 1. But yeah, it's worth using those if they come up. Am I doing the bonus thing today? No, the bonus for this one was last week. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Cool. Okay, hopefully we're all happy with that overview of the paper. Let's get stuck into what we're going to actually do in the exam itself. So have a look at the paper in front of you, right? I could have done better. Yeah, I could have done better. Drama will always let me down. But hey, I like to think that I didn't get the A star in drama because I can't act very well because I don't want to lie to people. That's how I justify it. But yeah, let's go. Any tips for reading with dyslexia? Yeah, so the approach that I'm going to mention now is very relevant if you are dyslexic, for sure. So with the paper in front of you, this is basically, if we gather everything together, obviously in your actual exam paper you will have the insert, which has got the 2 texts on displayed like that, and you will also have your questions on a separate exam paper kind of listed out like that. I've put them all together on the same slide here, so that you can obviously see everything together, because this is an approach that I'm going to tell you. The first thing that you should do is basically look at the questions before you look at the texts, because you need to think about what it is that you're doing with the extracts. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go, okay, question 1, read again the first part of source A from lines 1 to 10. So I'm going to find source A and I'm going to draw a box around lines 1 to 10. Okay, the reason for doing that is because if I include any points from anywhere else in the exam, sorry, anywhere else in the text, I'm not going to get marks for it. Okay, so I'm going to do that first. Next one, source A and source B, and question 4, source A and source B. Okay, so both of those I'm going to need to refer to both texts, but for question 3, it's only source A from lines 20 to 28, which means I'm going to draw a box around this paragraph. Okay, that's the first thing I'm going to do. So the first thing that I do is I'm just going to go straight in and identify where questions 1 and 3 are coming from in text A. The next thing that I do is I'm going to think about how to annotate for sources A and source B to find the similarities between them. Okay, so what I'm doing, guys, those of you saying read quicker or read faster as advice for people who are slow readers, that's not useful advice. You can keep it to yourselves. although it does remind me of something that Arnold Schwarzenegger once said when he was trying to convince people that they should dedicate more time to lifting weights. Um, he said, you know, you sleep for 6 hours a night, therefore you've got 18 hours in the day to make a difference to your life or whatever. And if you say that you need to sleep 8 hours or 9 hours, sleep faster, I recommend. Always a hilarious quote, but obviously not very good advice because it's not something that you can do. Okay, so let's save the advice for another time. I know you're just joking, but let's be nice to each other. Okay, so when you go through, you are going to basically, once you've done that, you're then going to read the two texts, and as you go through, you are going to you're going to annotate very briefly each paragraph. Guys, don't make me get the mod on you. I literally said the name of Arnie. That is his surname. Don't be pathetic. Thank you. Right. Yeah, thank you, Michaela. Guys, exam is tomorrow, by the way. Yeah. Just sort it out, guys. Have some maturity. Thank you. Right. So first thing that I do then, I'm going to go through, I'm going to read the first extract. All right. So first extract goes, every Saturday afternoon at the Pictures, there was a feature film, 16 cartoons, and an episode from each of 4 different serials. The program just went on and on. The Margaret Street children would join up on the Irene Street children. The combined mass would gather themselves, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm just going to say, next to that one, a little quick one, just saying something like, so, journey to movies, okay? And then for the next paragraph, in summer, the concrete footpaths were hot, blah, 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 blah. So, okay, so hot roads. And then for the next one, people are talking about getting different, okay, so different sweets. The next paragraph is specifically about fantails, which is a specific type of sweet. So the fantails experience. The next one is about star lolly, and it's again the experience. Okay, then the next one, so that one's about the Jaffa, and then the next one is about throwing sweets. And then the final one, fun during film, right? Now, why have I just done that? Okay, so you will notice that literally only took me like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. As I read through, all I did was I wrote, 3 or 4 words. In fact, most of it was only 2 words specifically about what's happening in each paragraph. And I just scrolled it along the side, and it only added, probably 2 or 3 seconds to each paragraph that I read. But what it means now is I can just look at my rundown down the side and go, okay, so this whole extract is literally just saying some kids journeyed to the movies. There were hot roads under their feet. They ate different sweets when they were there. It then describes the fantails experience, the star lolly experience, the Jaffa experience, throwing sweets, and then basically how people had fun during the film. Okay, so all I've done there is I've reduced your cognitive load. Okay, so for those of you who are asking about struggling with reading or being dyslexic or being slow readers, this is something that can help you later on in the exam. When you come back to writing the questions, you can see that you've already got these notes along the side, so you don't have to reread every single paragraph to know what's going on. Okay. You would do the same with source B. You would just do the same, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, paragraph 4, paragraph 5, paragraph 6, right? Simple, simple, simple. And it just reduces the amount that you have to hold in your head at any one time. That is your cognitive load. And it means that you are basically only having to keep 1 or 2 words in your head at any one time. Okay, then building on that, if you're still thinking that you might struggle to kind of become a master of these texts, you could just highlight like one word in each of your paragraphs. So you could go, so I might go moving along in that one. I might go leathery bare feet. I might go bright yellow shrapnel. I might go 6 small boys go through a packet during the course of a single afternoon. I might go Jaffa, right? So I might just go through with a highlighter, and I would do it with my other hand. If I'm being completely honest, I would have one hand with my pen in to scribble alongside each paragraph, and one hand with my highlighter just highlight. So I'd hold it like with my thumb like that, highlight a word, highlight a word, highlight a word. And then what you've got in front of you, so you'll see hopefully this with just a couple of words and a few words highlighted makes you a bit of a master of that text. And you just do exactly the same for the other one. It might sound like it's extra time that you were spending, but believe me, it saves you time in the long run because you're not having to reread paragraphs every single time you go back to answering a question. Okay, so that's the first thing that you do. You read through the texts, you do your little scribbles, you highlight any keywords that you think you might want to refer back to. Then you start thinking about the questions, okay? And the first question to think about are questions one and questions 2 and questions 4. So the first one is about still haven't unlocked the handwriting. No. Sometimes my handwriting is better and sometimes it's worse. Yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around this little magical box. Yeah. Any exam holder's got no? We don't have a question 7. So you're thinking of comparison. Ask me that question a little bit later. If you're from a different exam board, I can still talk about the overall skill of comparison. That's absolutely fine. Okay. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this question. It says the different experiences of the children, right? The different experiences of the children. And now that I'm a master of the two texts, I can very, very easily just draw a couple of quick lines. Okay, so I'm just going to go here and go, well, in this one, they both seem to eat sweets kind of indulgently. So we might go, everyone, without exception, bought at least one crumble bar. And in this one, people are eating sweets. They help themselves to the sweets pretty freely. And I'm just going to draw a line between and just say, eat indulgently, right? This is for this question, right? And then I might find another one and just go, oh, what's another one? So this is my kind of different experiences of the children. Well, they both eat indulgently, but these ones, they had to actually reduce their pay if they were eating these sweets. Okay, so that's my difference. So they both eat indulgently, whereas these ones could spend upwards of 5 shillings on the sweets, whereas these ones lose money from their paycheck. Then I'm going to find another similarity. Ooh, what might I find? Well, it seems like they're kind of at different levels of maturity, right? Because these ones in this text are super mature. The utmost speed by these little workwomen sitting silently hunched over their benches. Compare that with spare Jaffa's made ideal ammunition, right? They're literally throwing these sweets at each other. So my link is going to be maturity. And I'm just going to do, 3 or 4 of these. And all I need to do just to answer, to kind of annotate for this question is find a few links and just draw a line between the two texts with a word or two summarizing what the difference is. Okay? Compare that with question 4. So I'm obviously I would do more than just 2 links, but just in the interest of time here. I'm now going to compare how the writers convey different attitudes to sweets. So at this point, I'm going to go, so let's have a look. Hmm. Similarities, differences. Let's see. Extreme depiction. Okay, so I would say that in this first. Ooh, sorry about that, guys. I jumped ahead of myself. I would say that on this first one, it seems like eating sweets is like an extreme sport. Okay, um, we go like trying to eat a china vase. Compared with this one, which is much more kind of sanitized, it's very much talking about they tasted all the sweeter to the little ones. So I'm going to do extremeness. Okay, that's my linking word. How extreme it is. So in the first, in source A, eating sweets seems like an extreme sport. In B, it seems quite sanitized and mellow. Okay, okay. Um, that's kind of what I would do. And obviously, I would do more than just two links per question. I would find my links. I would do it in two different colors, right? Two different colors for question 2 and for question 4. Now, for those of you wondering why haven't we started answering the questions yet, it's because this very, very quick kind of 5 extra minutes when you're annotating is basically going to save you a bunch of time later on. Okay, so a couple of people chatting. Is a volta a shift? Yeah, a volta is a shift. Usually it's specific to poetry, but yeah, a turning point, a twist, a shift, any of that, yeah. My guys, can we stop with the bro down that we're all having in the comments? Just get along with each other, suck it up. Your exam is tomorrow. Focus on that instead of trying to look big. Okay, let's move on. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. HBiz is throwing some analysis at me. I remember you from last time. Sweet metonymy. Okay, so metonymy is where we have one thing kind of representing something bigger. Indulgence of desire has consequence, innate childlike desire suppressed by ordained rules of society, controlled society, lack of freedom for children, divergent. Nice, yeah, some nice points in there. Jasmine T, my teacher mentioned there's always a shift. Is this true for all texts? Most texts, yeah, there's usually at least some difference to give you something to write about. Devoided Zyra says, does having extra time, etc., plus readers, laptop breaks, etc., get you marked down? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Can we talk about a volta or avoid it? Yeah, I mean, I might call it a tonal shift rather than a volta because volta is specifically poetry terminology. But yeah, that's fine. Holly, I don't really understand the idea difference between question 2 and 4. Yeah, absolutely. We will come to that. So when you look at how they're written, you should hopefully see the difference between them. Yeah, okay. Hopefully that will make sense. Anyway, this is what your paper should look like before you've answered any of the question. You've gone in, right? You've drawn a box around the relevant sections. You've read both texts and scribbled a couple of notes alongside each paragraph. And then you've looked at questions 2 and 4, and with two different colors, you've highlighted the links that you're going to make. Okay? What that does for you is it saves you so much time later on. I know I keep saying that. I mean, I'm spending time purely just going over how much time this is going to save you, but it is so important. Okay. Do you get marks for annotations? No, not directly. So the examiner is unlikely to look at your insert. They will literally just mark what's within the box on your question on your answer booklet. Okay. Worth noting as well that when it's scanned on, anything that's outside of the box doesn't get scanned. So make sure you stay within the box. But yeah, nothing else gets marked. Louis, how do we do drawing lines between them when they're in a booklet? So typically the insert is literally an A4 sheet folded that's got one text on one side and one text on the other. Okay, so it should be presented like it is on my screen right now with the insert that you get in the exam. So it's not kind of stapled together with your answer sheet. It should be separate. Okay. Someone asking, is this for AQA or Excel? This is AQA. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Could you make notes outside the box so the examiner cannot read it? Yeah, that's fine. Abdul Rahman, if I draw a portrait of my invigilator, do I get marked down? No, but you'll miss out on marks, my guy. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so moving on. Look at this, guys. We're actually going to answer one of the questions instead of just talking about it. What an exciting time to be alive. So if you have a look at question 1, first thing to note about question 1 is it is a time suck. Okay, it sucks time away from things that are so much more important in the exam. Okay, it sucks time away from those things that are much more important. So sorry, what is going on? My power. Sorry, guys, I just got a low battery notification. Bear with me just a second. Really sorry about that. I will be with you in just a moment. There we go, magic. Okay, so sorry about that. So this is question 1. It is a time suck. Now, those of you who have come across any of the TikToks that I've done recently, I did talk about this the other day. I said that it basically pulls a whole bunch of time because people spend so much time on this question. Whenever I'm invigilating, whenever I am whenever any of kind of the students that I've had are doing mock exams, whenever any of that stuff is going on, I see people taking ages on this question going, oh, well, I can't tell if it's D or G because they're both really similar, but which one is true? Is one of them false, or is it just kind of subtle? Or I mean, and people struggle, and they spend so long on it. It's only 4 marks, so please don't spend any longer on it than you need to. Okay. Sam is saying, legitimately want to know if I get marks for having my teacher being fired or for no credentials. Wow, interesting. Okay, it's a good question. You can apply for what's called extenuating circumstances. Your school should do that for you. But yeah. Yeah, okay, we're all finding it rather more entertaining than I was expecting that my battery was about to die there. Yeah, let's have a look at the question. So it does ask you to choose 4 statements which are true. You're going to shade the circles basically like this, but obviously it's going to look better than that. And you're going to fill in the ones that are correct. Now, lots of you are suggesting correct ones. I'm just going to quickly read through the little section and let's see. Every Saturday afternoon at the Pictures, there was a feature film, 16 cartoons, and an episode each from 4 different serials. The programme just went on and on and on. The Margaret Street children would join up with the Irene Street children, and the combined mass would add themselves to Sunbeam Avenue children, and they would join the swarms of children from all the other areas, all moving north along Rocky Point Road towards Rockdale, where the Odeons stood. In summer, the concrete footpaths were hot, the tarmac footpaths were even hotter, bubbles of tar formed to be squashed flat by our leathery bare feet. Running around on gravel playgrounds throughout the spring, by summer we had feet that could tread on a drawing pin and hardly feel it. Okay, easy. Okay, now let's have a look. So we then just quickly go through the statements and fill in the ones that we think are true. Now, if you only get like 3, just move on. Don't spend any longer on it than you need to, because this question, like I said, becomes a time suck when you're trying to work so hard for 1 extra mark when you could instead go, well, I've got 3, I know these are right, I'm going to move on. HBiz is saying, why that horrible circle and not tick the box? Because it says to shade the circles. It says to shade the circles rather than to tick the boxes. So I'm just following the instructions on the exam. Heyo, had English tuition before this. When it finished, I joined this. No worries, we're only looking at question 1 so far. Okay. Some people, let's just check that anyone's asked questions that I might have missed. I think we're just chatting. Loads of chat about my my battery situation. Madness. Okay. So we're all fine then. So moving on. Let's have a look at what that should be. So the synonym program was every Saturday morning. It says every Saturday afternoon, so we know that one's wrong. So what you can do is you can just pop a cross next to the ones that you know are wrong as you're going through, because that should narrow things down. The synonym program was short. No, it says program just went on and on and on, so we know that one's false as well. Children all came from the same street. Well, it mentions Margaret Street, Irene Street, Sunbeam, so it's definitely wrong. Nice and easy. Children formed a large group as they moved through the streets. That sounds about right. I'll check later. The Odeon was in Rockdale. Where's Odeon? Rockdale, where the Odeon stood. Yes, that one's definitely right. The children wore shoes. Now, I think it said they didn't wear shoes, so we know that one's wrong. Children went to the cinema on foot. We know that one's right. The children had really tough feet. We know that one's right. Okay, so what I'm just doing as I go through really, really quickly is I just tick, 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 cross. And if I'm sure about them and I can see... if I can see that I've put 4 ticks, it's at that point that I'm then going to fill in my little boxes. So they formed a large group. The Odeon was in Rockdale. The children went to cinema on foot, and the children had really tough feet. Okay, and you'll notice that I've shaded rather than ticked, and as Jazz, my moderator, just said, they ask you to shade it because it's picked up more easily when it's scanned better than a tick, because a tick is just a thin line, whereas obviously shading, filling in that circle is much easier. Okay. HBiz, you love doing your analysis. I love that for you. You got some really lovely insights. Unfortunately, this question doesn't ask for those insights, but it's really nice to read them. On and on and on, inexorable continuation. Lovely vocabulary always from you, my guy. Thank you. What should I do if there's words that I don't understand? On this question, I would literally just pick 3 and then just crack on. Cool tat, thank you. Okay, now we're on to question 2. And because I was a smart cookie, I already thought through the links that I'm going to do. I should already have them annotated on there. But I'm just going to look. I've already done this one. So I've said basically, I remember I talked about indulgence. Okay, so that was my first kind of difference between them. I also talked about maturity, and I made my links there. My third link was the impact, so the results of eating sweets on your health. And another link that I found a difference was the settings. They were both dim, both kind of dim, dark, and dingy. But this one was nicer than this one. Okay, so all I did there was I made my links, and I just went through and I circled the relevant quotations from each text for them, made my links, and I did this earlier, okay? So I don't need to spend any extra time on this. Am I going through the paper? Yeah, going through the whole paper, okay? That first word for someone who can't read it, so for Eden, that first word is indulgence, okay? So in text A, they're indulging in the sweets, whereas in text B, it's something that they basically get punished for. If they eat sweets, then they get punished for it. All right? Okay, so I'm now going to look at how it looks when I respond to it. Okay, so we're finally, we've done all of that chatting, all of the annotating of the paper, and we're now at a point where we can look at how the questions are, how we respond to the questions. So, my first paragraph. In both texts, the children eat indulgently, but their means of access differ. In source A, the young people pay for their sweets, with 2 shillings being enough to buy you as much as you could eat, suggesting excess consumption. In source B, however, the children have their sweets consumption deducted from their already pitiful pay, suggesting their moderation would have been wise. Okay, so notice that this is just 2 sentences. Okay? And the first sentence is just synthesis. What that looks like is both texts do this, but this differs. Okay, so my first sentence is literally, here is my point of comparison, eating indulgently, but something is different. So that first sentence, really simple. I'm just going to go, I'm just going to say, in both texts this, however, this difference. Then I'm going to do really simple, basic comparative analysis. So in source A, the young people pay for their sweets. Okay, there's my point from source A. Gosh, sorry about that. My point from source A. Then my evidence from source A. And then that word suggesting, which is my explanation from source A. Then I have my linking word, however. So that is my link. And then I go, the children have their sweets consumption deducted from their already pitiful pay. So point 1, point 2, evidence 2, suggesting, again, explanation 2. So hopefully that makes sense. It's really simple. You don't need to go into close textual analysis. So notice what I didn't do. Notice what I didn't do at any point was go, this language feature does this, or this choice of verb does this. It's literally just text 1 does this, as suggested in the quotation this, suggesting this. However, text B does this, as suggested in the quotation this, suggesting this. Okay, and then we just do that again. So notice my next one, I do exactly the same thing. My next point is the children in the 2 texts have differing levels of maturity. So here is my link, maturity, and I'm pointing out that it's a difference with that word there. Okay, 2 texts, differing maturity. That is my synthesis. Okay, that's my synthesis sentence. And then I do exactly the same thing. In source A, they're wild, quotation, disrupting, there we go. In source B, in contrast, there's my linking word, the same thing. The girls struck well to their work and can be seen sitting silently, suggesting less fun is being had in their childhood. Okay, so I'm doing exactly the same thing. I say my synthesis, which is what the difference is between them. So I'm talking about them at the same time. That's what synthesis means, talking about both of them. And then I literally just do point, quote, inference, link, point, quote, inference, link. And I can do that all in one sentence. Is it possible to get full marks if you only do 2 points? I would recommend aiming for like 3. I would recommend aiming for 3. You can do 4 if you've got time. But this structure of writing, Martha, is comparison. Sorry, it's not comparison. It is synthesis. We call this skill synthesis with basic inference. So if you look up the skill of synthesis, spelled the way that I just did on the right-hand side there, hopefully that makes sense. HBiz, forever analyzing. Doesn't need ChatGPT. Stop accusing him of that, or her. Sorry for assuming gender there. Inexorably lovely vocabulary as always. Sweets uses a modality to explore differences in the epochs. Yeah, I think we're potentially getting more philosophical than we need to. But yeah, beautiful stuff as always. Okay. What's synthesis, Harris? Synthesis is where you just talk about both texts at the same time. So you say both texts do this, or the 2 texts differ in this regard. So it's your opening sentence where you basically assign a difference to them. Look at the 3rd paragraph. I'm doing the same thing. Another way the children's experiences differ is the impact. That's my point of synthesis there. So that's the thing that I'm comparing. And then I just do the same thing. You will see. In source A, there are plenty of hyperbolic references to lockjaw and crying, using sweets as missiles hitting skulls like bullets, suggesting sweets are no good for one's health. In source B, on the other hand, that's my linking phrase, the girls are not any the worse for their consumption of the supposedly wholesome sweets. Simple. And then finally, So like I said, you can do really well. You can do really well just by doing 3 points, but I decided to provide you with 4 paragraph examples so you can see basically multiple ways of doing exactly the same thing. Okay, so my final paragraph is just finally in terms of their surroundings. Okay, so that's the thing that I'm comparing, surroundings. Both settings are dim, but for differing reasons. So both are the same but different. Okay, so we can tell that it's a difference here in terms of the surroundings. Martha, a way that you can remember doing it. So for each paragraph, you're going to have your synthesis sentence, and then it's literally peel eel. So you can. It's not quite so catchy as peel, but spiel eel is basically what you're doing. Okay, super simple. Your synthesis sentence to show what the difference is, and then point evidence analysis from the first one. Link evidence evidence explanation. Oh, so you don't actually need that last L. My apologies. So it's spiely. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Olivia, is it similarities or differences? If you have a look at the question, it says the different experiences of the children, and different here. So you're looking to do differences. Sometimes it can give you an opportunity. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So SPIELY, if you want a nice memorable acronym, you're just doing all the things you did. So your S sentence, that synthesis, is just your overview where you talk about both texts at the same time. Okay, both texts at the same time. So you say both texts do this, however they differ in this respect, or you say a difference is blah blah blah. So it's where you talk about both texts at the same time to name the difference or similarity that you're talking about. Okay. Sir, I can't lie, that don't hit. Yeah, sorry, Abdul Rahman. It's not the most catchy, but yeah, it works. Okay. So you do. So Martha's saying you do 4 Spiely. Yeah, 3 or 4, depending on what you've got time for. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. You can see that this response that I've done here is 8 out of 8. Okay, that's a full mark response. There's nothing that's missing. I've quoted from both each time that I've made a link, and basically I've covered everything. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. We're all happy with that. Ask any questions. I'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions before we move on to the next question. But the next question, I hope you'll agree, is probably the easy one. Felicity, what does it stand for? The S is for synthesis, which, as we just talked about a minute ago, is just name the difference. So name the difference. I think my handwriting might be improving, you guys. An exciting time. And then it's just point, and then your evidence, then your explanation, and then link, and then you just do the same evidence explanation for the second text. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Ishdeep, is it always differences? No, not necessarily. Guys, seriously, can we stop with the beef with each other? It's kind of put me off a little bit because I'm actually vegetarian, so keep the beef on your own plates in your own homes. I do not appreciate it. All right, moving on. We're now looking at question 3. Okay, we're now looking at question 3. HBiz back again, absolutely tearing things up. Another modality to compare divergent stratums. Do we mean strata, plural of stratum? But yeah, it's always slang. Gurwum night, is that get ready with me night? G. Anyway, do you need to analyze techniques? No, not for this question. Only when it comes to comparison, which is later on. Okay. What's this guy on about vegetarian? I'm vegetarian, so I don't appreciate the beef. You guys are having beef with each other. It's a simple pun. It's not supposed to have you rolling around on the floor with excitement, but it's a simple pun. Because I would rather make a little bad joke out of it instead of criticizing you guys for being immature. Okay, so it's just a bit of fun. Okay, moving on. Question 3, we're now doing the most simple skill that comes up on the paper. How does the writer use language to describe eating fantail sweets? Now, I'm hoping that you see a question like this and you just go, yeah, I can do this. This is easy. I'm happy with this. Absolutely a walk in the park. All right. And yeah, someone's already saying, I cook this question. Yeah, absolutely. We can absolutely walk this one. Super, super easy. So we've not got any issues with it. That's the impression I'm hoping you guys get when you see this question. You guys are really, really kind with your congratulations of my humor. I honestly, I wasn't expecting such amazing responses to my throwaway joke, but I think I might actually just quit and become a comedian now because I'm getting such good feedback. Ryan, do students usually overcomplicate this? Yeah, they can do. They can do, yeah. Thank you, Lucas. Lucas is modding. If we keep it irrelevant, then we get kicked out. Okay. Jasmine, do you find out the marks you got on each paper? Yeah. So when you get your exam, when you get your results in August, you will get an overall sheet from the exam board, which has got all your grades for each subject, but you should also have a separate sheet for each subject telling you what you got in each paper. You don't get to know what you got in each question unless your school requests the paper back, but you get the mark for each paper back, yes. Charlie Smith, so if we call it beef, what do guys have when they're both vegan? So if I've got beef with someone who is also a vegan like me, I'll say I got tofu with you, my guy, and then we will have a large fight over what would it be, like lentils or something. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, chat has gone a bit chaotic. Okay, so let's look at this question. It's so easy. Hopefully, we should just do it with confidence. So, how does a writer use language to describe eating fantail sweets? We can now move into what should be the element for most of you, which is just annotating, looking for the experience of eating fantail sweets. So we need to see what it looks like for eating fantail sweets. I got McPlant with you. Spanik, I think that's the winner. I'm going to use that one. Thank you. Yeah, I do actually prefer corn over tofu. Okay, so fantails came in a weird blue packet, one corner missing. To be honest, one corner missing, to me, that sounds like an unhappy experience. So describing fantail sweets, it doesn't sound like they're actually all that appealing. Okay. Each individual fantail was wrapped in a piece of paper detailing a film star's biography, hence the pun fantails. Okay, cool. The fantail itself, okay, so that's not about eating the fantail sweets, is it? So I'm not necessarily going to mention that as my first point. Fantail itself was a chocolate-coated toffee so glutinous it could induce lockjaw in a donkey. Well, we all know what that's called. HYP. ERBOLE. You know what? Hyperbole, okay? Not hyperbole, don't get the pronunciation wrong. People had to have their mouths chipped open with a cold chisel. You know what? That's another example of hyperbole. I've got two examples. Easy. One packet of fantails would last an average human being forever. Oh my God, look at all of the hyperbole, left, right, and center. We're absolutely loading it up. A group of 6 small boys could go through a packet during the course of a single afternoon at the pictures. Okay, so 6 small boys to be compared with an average human being. It seems like an average human being would struggle. So clearly these are just for kids. They're a special experience for kids. Only kids can handle it. An average person would last forever on a packet of these sweets. But for 6 small boys, it's easy. They could do it over the course of a single afternoon. But it took hard work still. Involved a lot of strangled crying, yet more hyperbole. Any fillings you had in your second teeth would be removed instantly, yet more hyperbole, while children who had any first teeth didn't keep them long. Okay, so this whole thing that's going on, there's a whole ton of hyperbole. And yeah, Yassine, I really like that word cumulative effect. So it's only one M, but you're absolutely right. Cumulative effect of the hyperbole. It builds up a sense of this just being completely ridiculous, doesn't it? So hyperbole, God of Greg's, is exaggeration for effect. Yeah. Could you say the donkey is symbolic of foolishness, Jasmine? Yeah, you could. But specifically here, the reason it's talking about lockjaw in a donkey is because donkeys obviously have really big, powerful heads and jaws, meaning that this has to be something really powerful glue to overcome the power in their jaws, basically. So that's why it mentions donkey. But you could also bring in that symbolism. The things that I would focus on, though, would be the fact that, so I've actually already done it, haven't I? With my annotations, I've managed to pick out 3 things that I want to focus on. I've got my hyperbole, I've got the fact that the sweets themselves don't actually sound that appealing, and I've got the fact that only kids can handle eating them. Okay, so what I've done there is I've done my quick, really quick overview analysis, just annotating quickly, and then I've gone to I've picked out 3 things that are kind of repeated. Okay, Abdul Rahman. A hippos is more powerful. Yeah, totally. I'm sure it is. Yeah. HBeer's in with the analysis. As always, repetition of the hyperbole is used to greatly accentuate the danger and complex, distinct aspect of the suite. Egregious consequence. Check your spelling of egregious. The I goes before the O. Build up lockjaw overcomes nature design of the donkey. Yeah, nice analysis there. So we've got 3 analytical points that we could make. Let's look at how we put them together. Hopefully this question is the easy one, right? People asking about hyperbole still, it still means exaggeration for effect, if you missed that. Okay. So let's have a look at how we write it. And again, you guys should be pretty confident with doing this kind of response because you've already done language analysis in basically all the way through literature. You've done language analysis in paper 1 already. You've probably in your classes around the country done hundreds and hundreds of analytical paragraphs. I remember when I was teaching in classrooms, if I was ever like, okay, we're now going to do a peas paragraph, I would have my classes going, oh, come on, peas. I thought we were just going to chat. And the reason that they were like that is it's a good thing that they were bored by peas paragraphs is because we've done enough repetition that they were in a position to be bored by it because they were confident. Okay, it's just easy. Now I'm hoping that, you know, by the time tomorrow finishes, you'll never have to do one of these analytical paragraphs again. But the reason you've done so much is so that you can do this question with ease. Okay. Martha, do we get a break? Yes, we do. I'm going to schedule a break once we've looked at the first part of the paper. Okay, so let's have a look at my first paragraph. The passage oozes with hyperbole. Okay, that is my point. Yeah, making the eating fantail seem like an extreme sport. Really simple point. Then I've got my evidence. So the absurd claims that are being made, such as the sweet's ability to cause lockjaw in a donkey, jaws prizing open with a cold chisel, language choice in the semantic field of ruggedness like donkey and chisel. So I've got my evidence here, and I'm starting to go into my my close analysis where I'm zooming in on specific words, where I've got semantic field of ruggedness. I'm zooming in and explaining it there. Even going far as to explain blah, blah, blah. So my paragraph there is just super simple. All I've said is there's loads of hyperbole in there, which makes fantail seem like an extreme sport. And the reason that I put the second part of this sentence in is because the question asks about eating fantail sweets. So making the eating of fantails seem like, okay, so my first sentence is just very simply identifying what the hyperbole does. Okay, so my first sentence is just an overview, kind of like a thesis of the point. Passage uses with hyperbole, making the eating of fantail seem like an extreme sport. Then I'm just providing evidence. And I've included like 4 quotations to prove my point there. And then I'm zooming in on things like, you'll notice that I'm starting to use. I'm starting to use. Oh, sorry about that. I want a better pen than this. I want a highlighter. Um, I'm starting to use specific ideas such as the auxiliary verb. I'm also using semantic field, auxiliary verb. Okay, so I'm using terminology so that I can zoom in on the extract that I'm looking at. Okay, does that make sense? And then I'm just going to show you that I'm just going to do it again. So people are sharing. Can you talk about the humor? Yes, definitely. Definitely talk about the humor. If you've noted that there is fun stuff going on with the language, then comment on the humor. Because yes, this is supposed to be a funny paragraph. Funnier than my joke earlier. It actually lands, but it is deliberately in there, that humor. So yeah, comment on the humor. Double C, could you say connotations of weird highlights how eating the fantail sweets was a unique exotic experience? Yeah, you absolutely could. I actually went with a different angle, and you'll see it in one of my paragraphs coming up. I ended up not I ended up talking about how the weirdness makes it seem like they're not actually good to eat. But yeah, you can take that angle for sure. Felicity, what's an auxiliary verb? An auxiliary verb is like a helping verb. So if I said did walk, then walk is my main verb and did is the auxiliary verb. It's so modal verbs are all examples of auxiliary verbs. They help the main verb, basically. What's a semantic field, Olivia? A semantic field is words that are all in the same category. They're all talking about the same thing. They all have connotations of the same thing. Napshat, could you talk about the alliteration of chocolate coated? You could, but you would have to say something interesting about it. I would rarely recommend talking. I would rarely recommend talking about alliteration or other phonological devices, so things to do with sound. I don't think that sibilants, assonance, alliteration, that kind of thing are usually relevant on a question like this. I would save them for kind of poetry analysis. HB is the verbiage laden with stark consequences with a touch of humour provided through hyperbole consisting the majority of the description accentuates the extremity of the consumption of candy. Yeah, nice. Okay, my second paragraph, same thing is going on. I'm doing my first sentence. That said, eating sweets is also depicted as being manageable, but only for children. That is my point, the whole point of my paragraph. And then I go on. I do note that humour and the hyperbole that some of you guys talked about, with yet more humorous hyperbole. One serving is said to last an average human being forever, but a group of small boys just a single afternoon. And then I go straight into my analysis, suggesting that these sweets are the choice of hardy children. And then I'm going to do a little zoom, a little kind of zoom in, where I go with the juxtaposed adverbials feather and a single afternoon, creating a sense of adulation for the children eating them. Boom. Okay, so that structure is literally point, evidence, analysis, zoom, and I'm zooming in here on specific language features. Okay, so P's, you know, my classes who didn't like doing it before, it's just a nice analytical structure. All I did here to build my paragraph is I just did some extra analysis. So the D, which is for development, so I just made a couple of extra points here about what I'd already said. But the core of my paragraph is just this P's structure. Point, so I'm saying something related to the question. Evidence, I'm giving examples from the text. I'm analyzing those examples together, and then I'm zooming in specifically on language choices that are coming up. And that's when I would use my language terminology as well. Okay. Louis is saying, are you able to mention about foreshadowing in a language context? Yeah, that would be fine. It's usually more of a literary term, but you can certainly talk about ideas being planted early on that are capitalized on later. You would still call that foreshadowing. So yeah, that's fine. Jasmine, do examiners mark answers from a single school or is it completely random? It's completely random. It could, when I mark ones for the exam boards, I I have no idea where they're coming from. They've never been from schools that I'm teaching at. That's a requirement. They do make sure that that doesn't happen. But yeah, they're from all up and down the country, so it's never from one single school. No. Some of you saying it doesn't have the example paragraph. Does it not? The workbook should have all of these sample questions in. My apologies if it doesn't. Do make some notes on the points that I'm making if it's not in there. Pranav is saying, what does the Z stand for? Z equals zoom, which is where you pick out. So if you've got a longer quotation, okay, like this, it's where you zoom in. This is my telescope, not my telescope, my magnifying glass. You zoom in on a specific word from your quote that you comment on in detail. Okay, that's what the Z refers to. Guys, I'm really sorry if it hasn't ended up in the workbook. What I would recommend doing to compensate for that is making notes from the things that I'm talking through, such as the structure that I've just given you. But yeah, I do apologize for that. It should be in there. What does the D stand for? So the D is for development. D equals develop. And so basically you would go, a development would be your however. So you could say, it gives this impression, however, it might give the other one. Or you could do also, and that's where you add another example that still proves the same point. Okay, so that's what the D stands for. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that's what a full 12 marks response would look like for that question. 3 detailed analytical paragraphs following that basic structure of just P's and then maybe a development point where we go, I've made this point, however, it could also suggest this, or you go, also, here's some more evidence that my point is right. Here's another example of the same effect being achieved by different examples. Yeah? Does that all make sense? Does that all make sense? Yeah? Is P's the structure name? Yeah. P's, and then I would say potentially plus D. So if I put it up at the top here, so you can see P's, point, evidence, analysis, zoom, and then development if you want to add something. So the development stuff would literally just be where I've added some stuff to the bottom of each paragraph, where I'm just adding some extra points. Okay, that would be the D. Felicity, should we aim to write a conclusion or not? No, definitely not. Absolutely no need for a conclusion or an introduction in a question as short as this, okay? Because it's only worth 12 marks and you're basically only having 12-15 minutes on this question. You definitely don't want to be writing a whole paragraph introducing or concluding. You probably don't even need a sentence introducing or concluding. You just do your three analytical paragraphs and you should be comfortable with that, okay? HB is lexical choice. Yeah, I like saying lexical choice, just talking about it's another way of saying the choice of word, so I like that phrasing. Accentuates, another good verb to use, accentuating something. Yeah, nice, good stuff. Okay, hopefully that question will make sense to you. It's all stuff that you've done before. There should be nothing really new there. We're now on to, basically, it's the last question on the reading section of the exam, and it's supposed to be the hardest. You should notice that there are 16 marks available, which means that you should obviously be spending longer on this one than you had on the previous ones. Okay, you need to refer to the whole of source A together with the whole of source B, which is why earlier on we had our two texts like this next to each other and we made our links between them. Okay, that kind of looks like a corset or something. Anyway, we've got the two texts and we've drawn our links between them. Okay, so a couple of people have asked some questions. I want to make sure I answer those before we go on. Could you go over how many paragraphs we should write for each question? Yeah, totally. Remind me when we get to the Q&A for the reading section, and I'll answer that question, Martha. Shayuri, should we just do the paper from 1 to 5 or in a specific order? Sorry if someone's already asked this. It's a good question. I recommend doing them in order. Yeah, I don't recommend doing 5 first. Don't think it's really necessary. Okay. You guys just really want to be modded out of the chat, don't you? Okay, so the question itself is right here, and the question says, compare how the writers convey different attitudes to sweets. Okay, that is what the whole question is about. So earlier on, when I was preparing for this question, when I was talking about how to annotate for this question, you should remember that we basically summarized what our points were going to be that linked them together. Okay. So let's remind ourselves what they were. Let's see. Some people are asking questions. Do you get marks for spag in the first 4 questions? No, you don't, Julian. You don't. CFK, how come I do 5, 1, 3, 4, 2? That's fine. A lot of people just get confused, and most people who start with the writing section end up running out of time for the reading section. For some reason, it happens less often the other way around. So that's just purely from my experience. I think in principle, starting with question 5 is absolutely fine. But in my experience, when I've been marking exams, people who have started with question 5, i.e. they've written loads and then they haven't written all the way to the end of the reading section, so I assume they started with the writing, they end up struggling. Okay. Olivia, HBiz has answered your question. So why am I doing geometry on the paper? Yeah, it's a fair question. CFK, if you're always strict with timing, then you're all good. That's absolutely fine. As long as your system works for you, not a problem at all. Yeah. Okay, so for this one, I've already made my links, but I'm just going to remind you what those links were. So the first one, we talked about how it was basically extreme, whereas this one was just kind of sweet. Okay, so sweet, that wasn't a deliberate pun there, but it's a sanitized version. It's much more kind of light-hearted. Yeah, hold on to that good structure for question 5. I'd be interested to hear your idea on that one. The next, so this one here, it's so specific, right? Whereas this one is really kind of vague. It talks about some of the more showy sweets, metallic color, painted confectionery. It doesn't have any brand names. Compare that with Fantail. Compare that with Hoadley's Violet Crumble Bar. Compare that with Jaffa's, right? So this is very specific, whereas this is very generic. Okay, that's going to be another link that I make. Another one I might go for, in this one, these things make people really happy, whereas in this one, they oppress them. So this is an oppressive experience of eating sweets. You know, they get punished, they get it taken out of their work packages, whereas this one is really happy. You know, positive experience of eating sweets. Okay, so these links that I've made, I did those earlier on, right? This is just a reminder. But when I was reading through the extract in the first place, the extracts rather in the first place, I thought about the question, and I made my links between them. Okay. Okay, interesting. Joer, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. You talk about source A being informal and source B formal. Yes, you're absolutely right. However, remember that we're focusing on how they convey their different attitudes towards sweets. So you can talk about the register, you can talk about how it is formal or informal. However, you need to make sure that that links to their attitudes to sweets. So when you say that it is formal, you would need to be saying, informal in the first one, you'd need to be saying that informality shows that eating sweets was a fun, casual experience, whereas the formality in extract B shows that it was a much more tense, scientific, detached process. Okay, so as long as you can explore that idea of register, then that's absolutely fine. Okay. So register is to do with language, so you can absolutely mention it, but you do have to make sure it's linked to the explanation. Jawa here, is it? Okay, my apologies. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, link it to their attitudes and you're all good. So those are my 3 links. And I did my annotations earlier. I keep on going back to this idea. I did my annotations earlier, which means that I don't have to redo them now. Because it's so simple now. Because I've done all the hard work when I first got into the exam and I had all that energy. Now I'm just going, that was my point. I'm going to turn it into some writing. That was another one. I'm going to turn it into writing. Because I've done all of that. I've reduced my cognitive load by putting my brain into gear when I started, doing the hard work, the groundwork, and then just tapping into those bits later on. Louis is asking, can you talk about the form it's written in? For example, it's an article, it's a magazine thing. Only if the question asks anything about the way it's put together or like the way it's expressed. It would be a difficult thing to bring in, but you technically could. Again, like Gabe was saying, as long as you can link it to attitudes, i.e. the question, that's fine. When is break set? It's going to be after we have a look at the answer to this question, so it'll probably be about 6:30. Okay. So let's look at our response. Hopefully you've got this one in your books, but let's have a look. So look at the structure that I have come up with. So my first sentence is beautiful synthesis. Okay, I say beautiful even though I wrote it. I'm not actually I wasn't actually just trying to brag. I just mean I think synthesis is a really beautiful thing because it's just tying things together. So look at my synthesis sentence. And that is exactly the same as we did for question 2. So it starts in exactly the same way. All I say is one of the differences is the way they depict their attitudes towards sweets, is how extreme the depictions are, and then I make the difference, okay? So if I just draw your attention to that with my highlighter, if I can find my highlighter, it never stays in the right place. So differences, my word differences there, how extreme the depictions are, and that's it, okay? So in my opening sentence, all I need to do is say, this is a difference, and what that difference is. So a difference is, and here's the difference. In this case, it's how extreme the depictions are. And then all I do is I bring in this idea of in source A, it's like this. In source B, it's like this, okay? So that second paragraph really, that first sentence, the second part of it, is really just, apologies for my pen there, is really just bringing together a really quick overview of the link between the two texts. Then I go into my actual comparative analysis, but I've done, again, the hard part by doing my overview. So all I said, in source A, the writer imbues the text with a semantic field of violence, with lexical choices like shrapnel, strangled, cluster bomb, explosion, ammunition, and bullets, giving the eating sweets a military feel laced with humor. Okay, so notice I've done a really compressed, potted version of point evidence analysis. Okay, so I've done a really potted version of point evidence analysis. I've done it all in one sentence. In source A, the writer imbues the text with a semantic field of violence with quote, 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 giving the eating of sweets a military feel. So I've literally just done a one sentence summary. Charlie Smith, isn't question 4 just a better detailed version of question 2? Yes. The only thing that you do is you comment on the language features. The language features you do in this one, that's how you add your detail, okay? Yeah. Then I do exactly the same thing. In contrast, source B, and then I do my point, presents a sanitized version of eating sweets. Gently upbeat verb choices like delights young taste buds, positive adjectives, blah, blah, blah. Combining to give the impression, that's my analysis. And jobs are done. Okay? Job's done. Okay? So we've got that paragraph is literally a synthesis sentence at the start. PEA, so my point evidence analysis. Then I'm linking them here. Okay? And I'm doing the same thing again, PEA, and job is done. Okay? Notice as I go through, though, I am dropping in what I think are quite nice, easy examples of terminology. So we've got I've said lexical choices here, semantic field of violence. I've said positive adjectives and adjective wholesome there. So I'm using terminology as I go through so that the paragraph is nice and easy to get the marks for that bit. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Joa here, let's see what you've put. The writer does this to emphasize a difference between different childhoods and how different children from different backgrounds experience different feelings and memories from the same thing. Wow, you said difference so many times, but yeah, absolutely. So it's a nice bringing together of those points. Love that. Great job. Okay. Louis does English. Will you ever become boss man? I don't know what that means, mate, to be honest, but let's say yeah. Goals. Yassine, annotating is a waste of time. Just underline what you want to write. Yeah, well, the thing is, Yassine, I feel you on that one because a lot of people do waste time doing really detailed annotations. However, sometimes what people gain from annotating is, like I said earlier, that reduction in cognitive load. If they do a little scribble next to what they've underlined, it reminds them later why they underlined it in the first place. Yeah. Martha, it's basically the same as the earlier one. It's just more detailed, and you're doing your see where I've highlighted in blue, I've dropped in some terminology. So if you want to add a T for terminology into that spiely, like spletlet, spletlet, there you go. If you want to, that's fine. Maya is saying, in my exam I used peel but not in the order. Will I lose marks? No, the order doesn't matter. Think of it more like ingredients rather than a method. As long as you've got all the ingredients in there, when you mix it all together, it creates the same product. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, so let's just have a look at the other paragraphs because they follow exactly the same structure. Another notable difference between the writer's presentation of sweets is the detail and imagination surrounding the sweets. In Source A, the world of sweets is a veritable cornucopia to stimulate the children's minds. Bet HBiz is loving this vocabulary. Whilst in Source B, the world of sweets is described in fairly generic terms with a little sense of wonder. Again, that is my synthesis. Okay, really, really clear overview of what the difference is between the two texts and their attitudes. Okay, then we do exactly the same thing. We do our PEA. We link them together. So notice somewhere here you will find conversely. That's my link word. Source B is formal and detached, and then I just do the same thing. Okay. So somewhere in there you're going to have a zoom or some terminology where you're basically just going to go into a little bit more detail. Okay. Yassine is saying, is it true that examiners prefer a fluid answer structure? What, rather than something clunky? Yeah. I mean, I would certainly prefer it. Yeah. Don't get an idea on synthesis. You lost me there. Okay, CFK. If you ask that question again during the Q&A in a minute, then I'm happy to add a bit more details. All right. Let's have a look at the final two paragraphs. Thirdly, notice, by the way, how I've laid out my argument. One of the most striking differences, another notable difference. Thirdly, add finally, just to create a sense of an argument throughout the whole thing. Okay. Will you get more marks if you write in a more clear way than if writing the same things less clearly? I would say clarity is important, yeah. So if you notice that like HBiz and we're using lots of complex terminology, if the examiner couldn't understand what was being written, we wouldn't get the marks for that. So I would say clarity is more important than going too deep. HBiz has demonstrated that really nicely. An evident homologous aspect between such sources set in different moments. Love that word, modality. Yeah, so if an examiner gets lost in a piece of intellectual content like that, then you're not going to get the marks for it. So it's a shame. Okay. So question 4, I've done 4 paragraphs, and let's have a look at my final one. Finally, more directly, there's the difference in attitudes regarding what the sweets represent. So if you ask me in a minute, someone just asked me about synthesis again, I will explain it in a minute. Okay. Hopefully that all makes sense. Okay. So 16 out of 16 marks, that one would get. George Hayward is asking what the structure is. Essentially, it's exactly the same as we did for synthesis earlier. It's just adding detail and picking out language features as you go. Okay, so you've got your synthesis at the start. So all of these first sentences are synthesis. That's all synthesis. Then you just analyze both texts next to each other with a linking word or phrase like in contrast. In contrast here, we've got, what was it here? Conversely, and in this one, in contrast. So I've used in contrast 3 out of the 4 times. So you don't need to have that much variety for it still to be a really high quality. And this one, for those of you asking, would be 16 out of 16, a full mark response. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Do you have to do 4 paragraphs for question 4? There's nowhere in any exam mark scheme that I use says you need this many paragraphs at any point. So it's much more about the quality and the detail of the responses. You write for the allotted amount of time. So bear in mind this is 16 marks available. So you're going to spend anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes writing it. As a result, you obviously, some of you will be able to write 4 paragraphs in that time in that level of detail. Some of you will do 3 much more detailed paragraphs. Some of you will do 5 slightly less detailed paragraphs. It's going to vary from person to person. There isn't a specific number of paragraphs to get you to a specific number of marks. Okay, it's time for the Q&A. Big me up there is writing down answers to your questions. So we're going to do about 5 minutes of questions, all about the reading section, and then I'm going to give you a break, and then we're going to start the writing section. Okay, so any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Hit me with those questions. What we got, guys? Let's see. So for question 2, is it structure and language? And question 4 is just language analysis. So Elaine, for question 2, you don't need to comment on language choices. You literally just do your inference. So this quote suggests this. You don't need to comment on this particular word choice or this use of simile or whatever. You literally just go, I get this impression because of this quote suggesting this, and you move straight on. Okay, so it's really simple. You can do it in 1 sentence. Je m'appelle asking, is this Educast? No, this is AQA. Louis is saying, question 2, it's true, it doesn't need any analysis. Yep, sorry, that's what I was just saying, yep. What else? What else have people said? How many methods or examples would we need to use for each question to aim for top grades? Okay, so Felicity, for question one, obviously no technique there. You're literally just shading boxes. For question two, you're not doing any analysis of techniques at all. You're literally just doing basic inference on the quotes that you use to talk about the differences between the two texts. When it comes to question three, then you throw in your terminology. I would try and use one piece of terminology per paragraph. Ideally, when you're zooming in, you would go, here is a language feature that is being used in my quote, and that would be really good. For question four, again, do it as you go. So you'd probably have two per paragraph, one for each text in your comparison. Yeah. What else? How many paragraphs for each question, Martha? So paragraph one, no paragraphs, obviously, because, question one, no paragraphs, because it's just shading boxes. For question two, I would aim for three or four links for question two. For question three, I'd probably aim for three nice detailed analytical paragraphs. For question four, I'd aim for about four detailed comparisons. And obviously question five is a separate issue entirely. Hope that answers your question. Nice, Gabe. Yeah, I think that would be a nice structure. Obviously, that would have to be for a speech specifically. It's not always going to be a speech, but if it is a speech, then I like that structure. That's lovely. Yeah. Okay. Sir, I do two paragraphs, one each compares the two sources, but I still get 10 at least. Is that fine? The bit I don't get is after doing analysis, how do you compare the different perspectives on the two sources? I would make your opening sentence mention the attitudes or perspectives. So you know that synthesis sentence, make sure that you mention the different attitudes between the two writers. This is for question four, obviously. I would make sure that you mention those different attitudes. Okay, and that way you don't necessarily need to address the different perspectives later, because you've already said this is how the attitudes differ at the start, and then you do your examples and explore that way. Okay. In question four, can we talk about language and structure analysis? Yes, you can. I would drop it in as you're doing your comparison. Absolutely. So for question two example, you've done a source A and B together. Could you also do one paragraph on source A and another in B? No, you do need to talk about them both together. So the skill is synthesis, which requires you to talk about the two texts together. So you need to identify what the difference is first. What you're really getting marks for is naming the difference, and then you do your little bit of inference to kind of support it. But naming the difference is the key that is the key that kind of brings your synthesis together. So you do need to mention them both. I do wear a nose piercing, yeah, and an ear one too. SK, is 8 quotes in total enough for question 4? Yeah. That's usually enough. Depends how long the quotes are. You could have like lots of short quotations or one long quotation. If you're doing longer quotations, then just then yeah, 8. So 2 for each paragraph is absolutely fine. Do I recommend starting from question 5? No, I don't. I've said that before. I don't think it's a bad idea. I've just not seen it work very often. So someone's asking about the structure for each question. So for question 1, there is no structure. For question 2, it's really simple of Speely times 3 or 4. Question 3, I would do P's plus development sometimes times 3 usually. Again, it could be 3 to 4. And then question 4, you're still doing your kind of Speely, but it's plus, and that plus is zoom in on techniques. And you do that as you go. You can just drop in some terminology, okay? And you would do that 4 times, okay? That's those structures that I would recommend repeating. Um, so, someone's just asked about in spectacles. That was quite a long time ago. Um, Unless maybe you're in year 10. No, this is just about tomorrow's exam, paper 2. Um, Zara, before I forget, in part 2, question 5, can you use advanced punctuation like brackets or not? Yeah, good advice, definitely. So that's AO6. So definitely. Um, Yuri, how important is the first question, or can I skip? I would say if you're going to skip any, you can skip that one. It's only worth 4 marks. Um, And I mean, I do think that you could just go through it quickly. So you read the little paragraph and then you go, that looks true, that looks true, that looks true, that looks true. I wouldn't spend more than a couple of minutes, like maximum on that one. Uh, Abdul Rahman, I think I've answered your question already. You do need to talk about both texts at the same time because that is synthesis. That is the skill that is being assessed. Around how many marks do you need for a grade 6? So grade 6 is usually, I mean, the grade boundaries move about every year, um, but it's going to be about kind of 60 odd percent, really. But obviously it varies. Okay. Yeah, I can't answer that one specifically. What else? I'm not sure how many I've missed. What does Speely and P's stand for? Right, so S always equals synthesis. Point is always, sorry, P is always point. E is always evidence. And now E or A, they both basically mean the same thing. That's your analysis. The L is your link. D is develop. Okay. Okay. Right, you guys. I'm going to give you a 10-minute break. Okay. We're going to come back at 10 to 7, and then we're going to smash out that final hour. Okay. So we're on a break, starting from now, and hopefully I've answered all the questions that are relevant. Okay. Sorry, guys, I was having a bit of a difficulty getting my camera back on, but I'm here. I am here. Um, Now, just before we launch into this final section, I would be really grateful if you guys could scan the QR code and give us a review. If you found this session, if you found this session useful, if you have found any of the cram courses that we've done so far useful, if you hopefully found any stuff tonight enjoyable, any of that stuff, it would be amazing if you could drop us a review on Trustpilot. I will put this back up at the end if you want to do it later, but just a reminder, later on we are going to be dropping a survey and asking you, just with love and gentleness in our hearts, whether you would be willing to give us a review. There will be a link that goes along with the QR code if you aren't able to tap into the QR code. That's fine. Okay, so if you've got it just on your screen, then you obviously can't scan the code. There is going to be a link that goes out later, but this is just a little heads up. You don't have to do it now. But yeah, for Trustpilot, if you could check out Trustpilot and review us later on, that would be amazing. But yeah, okay. So we're gonna move on to section B. Okay. Now I've titled this bit one more thing because it is the final thing that you do. Now, obviously, some of you mentioned earlier that you like to go question 5 first, and that's fine. Like I said, it doesn't tend to work all that well in general when I've seen other people do it. However, it is one way of obviously jumping in first. Okay, so let's have a look at the question. Let's have a look at the question. By the way, if you missed your chance to ask any questions earlier, you can save them for the second Q&A session, which is going to be just before 8 o'clock. So if you didn't get a question answered about section A, feel free to save it till then. Should start doing physics with Brooke. Yeah, highly recommend. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the whole My Headspace team. That's why I'm here. So yeah, that's a good plan. Okay, so when it comes to this this part of the exam, the key thing to bear in mind is you're going to gasp first. The first thing that you want to do when you get into this question is to gasp. Okay, so for those of you who tuned into the into that bonus session that I did last week, we spoke specifically about how to address this. If you didn't go to that, you should still be able to watch it on catch up. I think it's quite a valuable session. If this is a section that you struggle with and you want another hour on it later on, or maybe tomorrow morning, then I would recommend going back and watching that. You can find it on my YouTube as a previous stream, a previous live. Okay, it was free, so you don't need to pay any extra for it. But that's some extra stuff. But I talked about gasp then, and basically a gasp is genre, it is audience, it is subject, and it is purpose. Okay, now the whole point of this is that your examiners, when they're marking you on this question, they care about not just your writing, but your writing modulation. Okay, now what writing modulation means is you are changing your writing for a specific purpose. Okay, now when you are getting stuck into this question, you will notice that in the mark scheme it will say that for the top level and every level down from the top level, it specifically states that the writing has been adapted to suit form, purpose, and audience. Okay, so form, purpose, and audience is basically form is the genre, the type of text it is. The audience is obviously who it's aimed at, or whom it's aimed at technically, and the purpose is what you're trying to do with the text. What you actually get from AO5 is marks on how you adapt your writing for each of those things. Okay, so I like to say that when you first get into the exam, you should gasp the question. So the question says, our addiction to cheap clothes and fast fashion means young people in poorer countries have to work in terrible conditions to make them. We must change our attitude to buying clothes now. Writing an article for a magazine or website in which you argue your point of view on this statement. So the genre, the text type, is an article for a magazine. Okay, that's our genre. The purpose is obviously arguing. This here is our subject, fashion exploitation. The audience, however, is kind of implied. So what kind of people read about fast fashion? So it's going to be people who care about fashion. There's probably going to be a mixture of young and older. So when you are adapting your register and your writing, you obviously need to adjust your writing for that particular audience in mind. Normally it will specify an audience, so it will say, you know, teachers or your peers or children younger than you. When it's just implied, then that's just something to bear in mind. So what we think about then, or how we use this planning thing, is essentially, I like to split it like this. I like to turn it into a cross. I like to think, what am I doing for genre? What am I doing for audience? What am I doing for subject? And what am I doing for purpose? And then over here, I like to think about AO6, and these are going to be some of the key words that I want to try and use in my writing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my AO6, and my AO6 is just going to be, what vocab am I going to boost this with? What really impressive vocab am I going to try and use? So I'm going to start with, well, I think because this is about greed, because it's, you know, fast fashion exploitation, I'm going to use the word egregious. I remember HBiz used that one earlier. I'm going to use the word squalid to describe their conditions. I'm going to use the word glutton, and I'm going to use the word exploitation, right? I'm going to make sure that I use these really impressive bits of vocabulary, and I'm going to try and spell them right as I go through as well. Okay, so that's what I'm going to remember to do for AO6. I'm going to tick those. I'm also, just around my little AO6 reminder, I'm going to just put a colon, I'm going to put a semicolon, I'm going to put a dash, I'm going to put an exclamation mark, I'm going to put a pair of brackets, and maybe an ellipsis. So I'm just going to put some funky punctuation there so that as I'm going through, as I use these, I can just tick them off, just to kind of prove, just to remind myself that I've managed to use the ones that I was aiming to use. So as I go through, I can literally just go egregious, yeah, I've done that one, squalid, glutton, exploitation, wicked. I've used an exclamation mark, I've used a dash, I've used a semicolon. So I can do that literally just as I go through. If you're wondering what the terminology, what this all means, egregious is where something is really kind of extreme, either really bad or really good. For squalid is like really poor conditions. A glutton is someone who is greedy, basically. A glutton is a greedy person, and exploitation is where you take advantage of people for some kind of gain, particularly for financial gain. Okay, and then I'm just going to go back to my my grid here. I'm going to think, okay, for genre, well, it's an article, so I'm going to want maybe, well, I'm going to want a heading, definitely. I'm also probably going to want a lead. You guys remember what a lead is? So I'm going to make sure that I include a heading and a lead. And then I'm going to think about how I structure it, okay? Now, a structure that I like for articles is tribe, okay? And what tribe stands for, because you won't have come across this before because I literally just made it up the other day. So for an article, I like to start with a tale, okay? So I like to start by telling a little tale, a little story to set the scene. I then like to go into relevance. Basically, I explain why my tale that I started with was relevant. So basically explaining what the point is. Then I'm going to go into individual. So I'm going to tell a little individual story, probably about fashion exploitation, because that's the subject. Then I'm going to have my B, which is big picture. So that's where I'm going to zoom out and talk about, statistics and stuff, right? That's going to be where I include my stats. And then my E is basically going to be my entreaty, which is like a big ask. I'm going to ask my audience to think or feel a certain way because I've just argued my point. So tribe, that's the structure that I'm going to use. Okay. So that's all I would just jot down quickly just to remind myself to do it for my genre because it is an article. That's what I'm going to make sure I do. For my audience, right? I'm thinking, okay, well, the audience are probably buyers of clothes. They like fast fashion. So I'm probably going to use words like threads, okay? Because that's how people into fashion talk about clothes. I might go with drip, obviously. I don't want to sound too cringe and like I'm not that old. Someone's just asked, do stats have to be accurate? Hell no, absolutely not. You make them up. You're not being tested on your knowledge of the fashion industry, just on your writing skills. So make up your stats for sure. I'm also going to use words like vintage, maybe retail. Okay, so I'm thinking of keywords that I'm going to try and use to appeal to my audience who are interested in fashion. I'm also thinking that, well, they're probably going to be quite young, my audience, or some of them are going to be young. So I'm going to use young people expressions like rent-free in my head. Okay, I hear young people use that all the time. I probably sound really old by saying that, but I don't care. I'm going to use, so basically like friends, like young people expressions to relate to the younger people there. But there are also going to be some older people there. So I'm going to keep it mostly formal. Okay, mostly formal. I'm just going to make a quick note to do that to keep it basically quite formal. Sparnik is saying, in my honest opinion, I would share my points of view on both sides rather than one side. You're arguing a point of view though. So you can include people's points of view on the other side, but you're arguing a point of view. You don't want to spend too much time on the other side. So be careful with that one. A balanced argument is good. However, you really don't need to. So for the subject, now, this is a really key thing. I don't know anything about fashion exploitation. I know that sweatshops are a thing. I know that loads of it happens in Kuala Lumpur. I know that it involves exploitation. But the fact is, that stuff is not being marked. Okay, you absolutely are not being marked on it. Bond 6734, nice to see you. Is ambitious complex vocabulary necessary for the paper 2 question 5? Yes, that's why I've done it over here just above my head. Some of the keywords I'm going to try and remember. Harms made a really good point. Don't forget, make the stats believable. So rather than saying 99% of students get 8 and 9, say maybe 23. So yeah, make it believable, but it doesn't have to be true. Really, really great point. CFK is sharing some great examples of vocab that you might want to use for this question. Social plague, catalyst for greater dilemmas, ticking time bomb, beautiful stuff. Love that. Yeah, really, really nice. Svanik, why is KL in there? Because that's where a lot of sweatshops are based in Malaysia. Jasmine T, will the examiners be aware of pop culture / slang references? Within reason, you don't want to turn it into just like one meme after another. You want to just try and make the language relatively relevant to the given audience. Okay. Guys, can we move on with the Wagwans? They have really got out of control. It's making it quite difficult for me to find questions from people who are actually asking questions. So if you could put a pause on that, I'd really appreciate it. I just want to see if I've missed any from earlier because I was in the zone, zooming off. Ayan asked what frivolous means. Frivolous means kind of silly. Some of you talking about Google Chrome. Yeah, I don't think I missed anything. Okay, so that theatre kid, can I say what the sigma on my paper? You can, but considering that I don't even fully know what that means, and I work with young people every day, um, I probably wouldn't recommend it because it's just going to sound a bit nuts. Um, Bon, can you save that question for later on? We're going to focus on the writing section. Okay. So where's my pen gone? There it is. So for my purpose, though, that's where I can do something. So I want to have a clear point of view. Okay, that's really important. I don't want to be having like just talking generally about this question. I want it to be really, really clear. Okay. Joa here is saying sanctimonious. Nice. Sanctimonious is where you are basically acting like you're better than everyone else. I already did define the terms A ultimate on for the AO6 bit. If you want to rewind, what else? Svanik, what's virulent? So virulent is basically like energetic, and often not in a good way. Yeah, bro, going to talk about skibbity as persuasive writing. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend going too off the wall with the slang. Yeah. Petulant, yeah, meaning kind of defiant and rude. What else? The effect of brain rot terms on teenagers in 2024. That could be a study that you quote for sure. Will you always get a choice between two of the layouts? No. Yeah, you could use pneumono ultra microscopic syllovolcanoconiosis to impress people with your vocab, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's too long. It's too long. Not particularly relevant. For question 5, can I use da forest? Yes, if it is asking you to be persuasive. It's really, really important that when you are doing, because I see loads of people ask this question about a forest and da forest and stuff. It's only relevant if the question is asking you to be persuasive or argumentative, if it's trying to convince people of something. If it's a question that is asking you to inform people, then da forest is less relevant because that's about rhetorical devices, basically. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Bro did not say it right. No, I didn't. I didn't. I realized that as I was going through. But yeah, it's really not a relevant word. Also, just so you guys know about that extra long word, there is a shorter version of the exact same condition. Pretty much the only context that people ever use that word in is when discussing the longest English word. There are also words that are longer in the scientific context, and there are also shorter, more frequently used words like anti-disestablishmentarianism. But again, the vast majority of these sesquipedalian words are only used when talking about words that are really long. They don't make you sound smart. They just make you sound like you've done a quick Google of the longest words. Okay. Anyway, so for my purpose of argument, I want a clear point of view, so I don't necessarily need that much balance. I am going to use some rhetorical questions in there to make it clear that I am being kind of persuasive or argumentative. I'm going to make sure that I've got some statistics, maybe some emotive language in there. Basically, I want my audience to feel something, so I'm going to try and make sure I do that. And I've already included some of the emotive language that I'm going to use up here. Okay, so essentially, what I've done for you there is I've just shown you how I would plan an answer to this question. So I just split it down the middle into 4, GASP, just to show that I'm ticking these boxes, a little bank over here of AO6 things, and then I'll go straight into writing. For those of you asking me to do a bank of ambitious persuasive vocabulary, I can throw some words at you as we go through for sure. Right, have I missed anything else before we go into the actual writing bit? Let's have a look. How long should I spend reading the text? Should I annotate the whole source whilst reading it? Benoit, are you asking about section A? Save that for the Q&A at the end and I'll try and answer your question. TCAM says, can you use your friends for anecdotes? Yeah, 100%. But remember, again, your anecdotes don't have to be true either. Nothing that you write has to be true. It just has to be good writing and it needs to suit the purpose of the question. Okay. So yeah, feel free if you have some inspiration from people around you, include them. You can even quote them if you want. Hams, should I start my writing with a paint the picture scene? So like imagine this, or like placing people in a certain point of view. Yeah, it can be relevant. It's kind of what I decide to do when I start with a little story. Yassine, what would I use for informative written piece? Well, you still include your statistics. You would include lots of kind of declarative sentences, maybe some imperatives in there to give instructions, etc., etc. If you did it in the form of a website, Aman, how would you do it? I wouldn't do it any differently from any other kind of magazine. Typically, magazines have a print version, which is put on paper and sent out to people to read the magazines, and they have an online version, and it's exactly the same text. So don't feel like you need to vary it. Okay. Bonnie, do the stats have to be somewhat accurate? Because what if I don't have a clue about the topic and guess some random stats? No, they don't have to be at all accurate. They just need to be believable. Someone was saying that a minute ago. I think it's a really good point. Yeah. Okay. What is an anecdote? An anecdote is a little story that proves the point that you're making. Okay, so an anecdote would be I'm talking about the dangers of smoking, and I would talk about an anecdote would be a story about a friend of mine who got ill from smoking repeatedly and then got well again by quitting, or something like that. That would be an anecdote. Yeah. Yeah. Can I quote Vogue? Yeah, absolutely. You go for it. Okay. So here is how I'm starting to put it together. So remember, this is an article, therefore I have started with a heading and a lead. So basically, your heading doesn't have to be something that you spend ages on. All that you do to prove to the examiner you're aware that it is an article is by including a heading in the first place, and making it seem like a heading. It doesn't have to be really clever or whatever. Bon, the structure of epic. E for established audience. P, picture this or dystopia. I, imagine utopia. So how things are bad and how they could be better. And then I, own experience. C, counter argument, and then counter argument, or the destruction of counter argument. Yeah, I think that's nice. I think that's a really nice structure. I would probably have some kind of resolution at the end, like a call to action or some kind of takeaway for the audience. But it's a really nice structure. Yeah, I like that one. You saw my example is tribe. It achieves the same things, doesn't it? Can I use repetition in enough? Yeah, so enough is basically an expression, right? When I say believe, so Svanek is asking, believable stats, does it mean you can say things like millions of people work in poor conditions for companies like blah, 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 even if it may not be accurate? Yeah, yeah, because that sounds believable, doesn't it? If you said like 7 billion people work in horrible conditions for these companies, then obviously that sounds unrealistic because that's like the entire population. Yeah. Yeah, so make it vaguely believable, but it doesn't have to be actually the truth. So what I've done here in my introduction is, because this is an article, I've got my my heading, which is literally just face up to fashion exploitation. I've used a little imperative there to grab my audience. I've shown that I'm writing about the right thing, so I've signposted to the examiner that I'm answering the question, and I've used one of my key bits of vocabulary there, exploitation. So it's clear that I'm writing about what I'm writing about is relevant, and it also looks like a heading. This bit here, which is called a lead, is basically you give a kind of a brief overview of the attitudes of your article, right? So it's a bit like a subheading, but it's not an actual heading. It's just a sentence that summarizes the attitude of the article that you're about to take. Okay. Maya is asking, for an article, do you have to use subheadings? No, to be honest, To be honest, Maya, I would, if I'm going to add subheadings, I would put them in later. I would literally add them at the end. Um, I wouldn't have them to begin with because it causes people literally just to write about one thing and then a new subheading they talk about something totally different and the whole piece loses cohesion. So if anything, I wouldn't bother. Okay. CFK, I may have missed your message. I do apologize. Feel free to send it again. I'll try and look at the screen. I've got two screens, so I need to balance between the chat and my screen here. Do send it again, though. My apologies. Tip right, dear name and end with sincerely. If you write dear sir or madam, end with yours faithfully. If it's a letter, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. Is lead the first thing that you write? Yeah. So you have your heading, then you have your lead, and literally it just summarizes the attitude. Lou Provis says enough is enough when it comes to our tacit endorsement of sweatshops in the name of donning standout threads. And again, all I've done there is I've used some fashion friendly words like sweatshops, donning, and threads, because that's all related to the S of gasp, the subject. I've also shown my attitude here because it tells you to have a point of view. So this is my purpose being achieved. When it comes to our tacit endorsement, that's some really nice AO6. Tacit is unspoken and endorsement is supporting something. Okay, so I do my heading and I do my I do my little lead, and that's how I start my piece of writing. Do you have to put that part under the heading? Yes. Yeah, straight after the heading. What are people saying? This baklava slaps. Awesome. I'm jealous. Love baklava. How many paragraphs should we write? That varies considerably on how you write your paragraph, so I'm definitely not going to answer that one. CFK, you keep saying sir, and like I've missed your question, but I can't see any comment from you. I can just see, can you give me feedback on my message and sir, but I can't see the question itself. Can't see the message at all. So I apologize. If I've missed it, I literally cannot see it at all. So hopefully it comes back. Anyway, I'm going to go back into the writing. My first paragraph. My first paragraph, as I said before, is my T paragraph. I'm going to tell a tale. So my tale is basically setting the scene. Okay? So, Jasmine T, is using contextual vocab part of the technical accuracy? No, because that would require you to know about the subject. Contextual vocab that I was just talking about is to show that you are writing about the brief that's been given. You are on the subject. Yeah. Spanik, endorsement is where you agree with something or support it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's go into the writing. So my dad makes me laugh. So I've started with a short sentence, a short provocative sentence, which draws people in, because we think, what on earth has my dad got to do with fashion? I mean, I can tell you now, my dad has no fashion sense whatsoever. He is like 80, and his fashion sense comes directly from the 50s, which I'm sure was a great time. Anyway, Bon, ask me that question in the Q&A at the end, a run through of the difference between the different text types. I'm more than happy to do that for sure. Okay, so I start with a nice short provocative sentence. And I'm telling a little story now. He told me a few years ago that when he brought his raincoat as a child, he'd have to save up his pocket money for 3 months and work for extra coppers from his neighbours by mowing their lawn or cleaning their car, and that he'd then have to catch a bus to the local shopping centre to pick it out, and that afterwards he kept it in good condition and worn it every sub 10 degree for 12 years. What I've done here is I'm showing off to my examiner that I've got a long sentence, which is technically perfect. So grammatically, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I just want to show you the way that I've managed to extend the sentence. This is very much, what Charles Dickens did. I embedded this clause. He told me a few years ago, embedded, that when he bought his raincoat, embedded clause, as a child, he'd have to save up his pocket money for 3 months and work for extra coppers from his neighbours by mowing their lawn or cleaning their car, and that he'd then have to catch a bus to the local shopping centre to pick it out, and that after that he'd kept it in good condition and worn it every sub-10 degree for 12 years. Okay, so my really long paragraph that I've put in there, sorry, my really long sentence, has been extended with really clever use of embedded clauses and coordinating conjunctions. And you'll also notice, I hope, that I've managed to slot in an apostrophe, a dash, 2 hyphens, and there's another apostrophe there. So with lots of punctuation. So my long sentence with lots of varied punctuation, and we end up with this nice, long, clever sentence. Okay? Then, that was the 1950s. This is now, and that is what makes me laugh. Even to imagine such a thing these days tickles me. Another embedded clause, a nice little ellipsis there, and gives me a prickly sensation at the back of my neck. I thought it was just a shudder emanating. AO6, I'm showing off my vocabulary from the bottom of my spoiled stomach about having to spend so long on one item of clothing, but I know better now, okay? So I've hooked you. I've put a hook in place for my audience at the end of that paragraph to make you want to read on to the next one, okay? Now I'm just going to look back at the chat, see if there's anything I missed. I don't think I've missed anything. Just guys having your chat. That's cool. Okay, nice. So my first paragraph, I'm basically showing my examiner, yo, I can do all of this. I can do simple sentences. I can do compound. I can do complex. I can also use a range of punctuation, including apostrophes, dashes, hyphens, ellipses, as well as your basic commas and full stops. They're all accurate. I've also shown that I've got some nice, impressive vocabulary with words like emanating. And I've managed to create a bit of intrigue with having my short sentence at the beginning and that hook at the end to make you want to read on. So essentially, Shazam, I've got a really beautiful opening paragraph that makes you care about what's coming next. Now I link my paragraphs together, where I've gone, I know better now, that prickly sensation was guilt. So this is what we call cohesion. One paragraph links to the next, okay? It's really clear that this is building on, and this is why I don't recommend putting subheadings in. When people put subheadings in, they forget to create cohesion between their paragraphs. Okay, guys, stop talking about geography or get out. Simple as that. You're distracting other people. Come on. More accurately, I suppose you'd call it cognitive dissonance. Look, I'm starting to step up my my AO6 again. Psychological, cognitive dissonance, discomfort, coexisting, and then I've done my little rent-free. It's AO6, but I'm also appealing to my audience. Okay, I'm ticking the box by appealing to my target audience. Okay. What if you write less than the amount of pages in the paper? That doesn't matter, Svanik. Doesn't matter. You can do, yeah, you could. Different people have different sizes of handwriting, so it's not really such an issue. Okay. Now I'm going on to talk about the topic right here. So I love buying new clothes, but I also love children. I'm a paternal individual. Fatherly instinct in me simply cannot abide by the reality. Okay, so this is me signposting again. I'm showing the examiner that I'm still talking about the given topic. Even if I don't know anything about fashion and I'm making it all up, I'm keeping it relevant to the topic, which was about exploitation in the name of cheap clothes. Okay. Then I've gone where my clothes come from, when are this accessible, this varied, this cheap. I've also used a nice example of what we call asyndetic listing here. This accessible, this varied, this cheap. Asyndetic listing, bit of anaphora. It's a nice, powerful writing structure. Then we go, nothing like this comes for free. Oh, look, ellipsis again. But it doesn't mean that we pay the price. No, that price is outsourced to Malaysia. Again, I've got myself a little hook. And the hook is going to take us on to my next paragraph. And my next paragraph, as you'll see, the price is outsourced to Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. Okay, so I've got cohesion once more. Examiners really care about cohesion. So when I've been looking at examiners' reports, it's it's my bedtime reading because I'm a massive nerd. I see really frequently on this part of the exam, one of the biggest complaints examiners make, and one of the biggest complaints that I have when I'm marking this part of the exam, is cohesion. You are marked for both AO5 and AO6 on your paragraphing. Okay, that's how you structure your piece of writing, how the paragraphs connect with one another, as well as actually breaking it up into paragraphs. Okay, so cohesion is really important, and if you don't do it, then you're missing out on both AO5 and AO6 marks in the exam. You don't want to be doing that. Okay, so cohesion is really important. I've done it in my first two paragraphs where I've gone I know better now. That prickly sensation was guilt. Cohesion. That price is outsourced to Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur. Cohesion. And then I go into my writing. Thousands of children are working 100-hour weeks year-round to earn a pittance. What's more, to earn the privilege of working for a clothing manufacturer, being paid 1/100th of the UK's minimum wage, they have to pay hundreds of dollars of so-called recruitment fees. Notice here that I've embedded a whole load of facts and stats. Okay, because at this point I'm wanting to make it really clear that in the exam, sorry, in this question, I am trying to argue a point of view. Therefore, I'm providing proof for it. Okay. Olivia, what is cohesion? Cohesion is when your paragraphs flow. So you can see I've connected my paragraphs together. I said, I know better now what it was. So that prickly sensation was guilt. That price is outsourced to Malaysia. Kuala Lumpur is in Malaysia, so I'm making that link there. Okay. So that's what cohesion is. It's making sure my paragraphs flow one into the next with links like that. On my recent holiday to the country, I was able to see firsthand the squalid conditions, kablam, exploitation, egregious, glutton, qualms, tenfold. Okay, so what I'm showing off there, I got to this paragraph and I was like, my guys, I want to make sure that I include a bunch of impressive vocabulary. It's been a couple of paragraphs since I slotted something really good in there. I'm going to put it back in. Okay, so this paragraph is full of a lot of kind of impressive vocabulary, and that was a deliberate ploy. But it's also got a whole bunch of emotive language. So violent exploitation. Okay, burning shame, egregious glutton, zero qualms. I felt sick all the way home. Enough is enough. I've packed that with a whole bunch of emotive language. It makes you feel about it. Spanik, in answer to your question, do we really need to add that much of vocabulary? No. What I realized is that I wasn't being as impressive as I could have been, and I'd got to the third paragraph. At that point, I was like, I'm going to just slot in a couple more from my list. So remember that I'd already written them down, so it's not like I had to spend a bunch of extra time thinking. I'd already written them down on my plan on the previous slide. So all I did was just slot a couple of those in. So you'll remember I had squalid, exploitation, egregious, glutton. I had all of those already in there. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Then the next paragraph, it's at this point. So if we're following my tribe structure, guys, this is my tail. This is my relevance. This is my individual. Okay, so I'm talking about an individual case study, particularly of Zikri. And then at this point, B, this is my big picture. Okay, so I'm talking about the big picture of exploitation, and I'm bringing it out. Okay, so we've got over 73% of clothing available online and on the high street is attributable to sweatshops abroad. A further 11% comes from manufacturers whose businesses fail to meet the minimum labour standards of the United Nations. I made all of that up. Sounds convincing, but it's all made up. Making matters worse, blah, 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 blah. 300% increase in retail prices would be necessary. So stats, all right? I've included a whole bunch here to make it really, really clear that my point of view is getting across. Ayan is bored. I'm sorry, sausage. We're nearly there, mate. We can do it. We are, we're half an hour away from the end, and then you've got your final exam tomorrow, and you can never think about English again. Aisha is asking, is it going to be a speech, letter, or article? Yeah, it's likely to be one of those three. Likely to be one of those three. Okay, let's have a look. Now, at this point, I've told my tale, I've done my relevance, I've done my individual and then big picture, including all my stats. And at this point, for E, my final E is basically my entreaty. I'm going to ask people to do something or to care. Svarnik, the stats, be it non-accurate or accurate, yeah, so they're totally made up, but they sound believable, don't they? SK, I have no predictions about the topic that will come up now. It could literally be anything. Anything. It's not like lit where there's a selection that I can choose from. It could be literally anything. So no, I never make guesses for English language. Okay, so here's my final paragraph. But of course, this is the point. Okay, so again, if you have a look at my cohesion, my budget would be strained by this. But of course, this is the point. So again, cohesion, all of my paragraphs link together. One flows from the other. Okay? So they cannot, nay, should not be maintained. The reason my father here, I'm linking back to the start. Now, obviously in creative writing, we can talk about a cyclical structure. In kind of non-fiction writing, I tend to call that a callback. It's basically where I make reference back to a story that I mentioned before. Okay, so I've mentioned my father at the start, and then I mention him again in the final paragraph to kind of tie things together. Let's see. Where do the exam boards get the sources from? Is it literally anywhere? Alex, yeah, anywhere. Absolutely anywhere, which makes it very difficult. Svanik, just realised if stats can be non-accurate or accurate, can tabloids or certain sources just give us inaccurate stats which sound believable? No, because they're held accountable. So quite often journalists do make things up, but then they get called out by the public and they have to publish a correction, or they get sued, they get in trouble if they publish something which is a lie, particularly if it defames someone else. It's called libel. But in the exam, we're not publishing this. Okay, so we're not held accountable, so we can make it up because all we're being assessed on is our writing. Whereas journalists and newspapers, etc., they do need to, they're held accountable. So yeah, so don't worry that everything that you read is all made up. Ishdeep, so a cyclicality, yeah. So a callback is basically you mention a story and then you bring it up later to kind of tie your piece together. Jasmine T, surely no matter the question, you still have to be persuasive in order for the piece to be compelling. But there's a difference between being compelling and being persuasive. Persuasive is getting someone to think or do something differently, whereas being compelling and interesting doesn't require anyone to change their behavior. Okay, so compelling, it needs to be convincing, yeah, but not persuasive, because you're not trying to change anyone's opinion. Hopefully that makes sense. Sorry if it wasn't clear. What else? Alex, does it at least have to be believable? Yeah, should aim to be. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's good that major corporations are held accountable, especially with the amount of fake news. I agree. Okay, I think that was the last question from that little bit. So I'm just going to read the rest of my final paragraph. The reason my father had to save for months and was able to wear his coat for more than a decade was because the clothing used to be built to last, carried a proportionate price tag. Again, got my little AO6 there with the word proportionate. If we want to make, if we want to make the changes, and then later you. At this point, we've got direct address, because in this paragraph, I'm entreating my reader to think or do something. Okay? Joa here, I didn't mean to rub everything off. It's actually on a new slide. So each time a new paragraph comes up, it's a new slide. Yeah, it's not ideal. But that's what's, so each paragraph, there's a new thing to annotate. Saves me space on the screen as well. What's the ... for? What's the ellipsis for? Basically, I did it when I've got a, it's kind of like the writer has kind of tailed off into thought and then a realization has arrived. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Guys, keep it relevant. Thank you. Yes, back to English. Thank you. Right, so that's my final paragraph. If we want to make any kind of change to the lives of children like Nikri and the thousands of others who are packed in like sardines to his factory, we need to go vintage, not in terms of style necessarily. Oh, typo there. There's a typo in my answer. Maybe I would lose a mark for that in the real exam, but probably not. Necessary should be necessarily. Okay, so little typo. Maybe this would only be 39 out of 40 instead, which is why proofreading is so important. Clearly, I didn't do my proofreading well enough when I wrote this piece. We need to insist as the paymaster of these manufacturers that demand is not there for fast fashion. They should be supplying quality over quantity to secure our business. Our wardrobes will be a little more sparsely packed, our wallets a little leaner, but when it comes to saving lives, those feel like small sacrifices to me. What do you think? That direct address is also my rhetorical question, which I'm going to end my piece of writing in, and boom. No, you probably wouldn't lose a whole mark for a typo, particularly as you won't type in the exam, most of you. Can I ASMR the last paragraph? I would do, but my voice is really struggling, so I apologize, but I can't. Yeah, don't worry if you make the odd mistake. Not that much attention is drawn to it. Okay, so there we have a full mark piece. Maybe it would be 39. But no, you're unlikely to lose a whole mark for a typo or a very brief mistake. Okay. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. That's a whole piece of that's your whole piece of section B writing. Those of you asking what ASMR is, it's yeah, YouTube it later. It's an interesting genre of video that helps to relax people. Look into it though. How long did this take me? Well, it took me about 20 minutes, but then I'm obviously more experienced with this. Bon is saying, sir, it's an argument, so I think your last rhetorical question should be more critical of the reader. It's a fair point. However, when it says argue, if you look at the question is argue your point of view. It's not saying argue like get into an argument with your reader. But yeah, I mean, you could be more provocative if you wanted to. There'd be no harm in being more provocative at the end by just going, what do you think? Don't be selfish. Yeah, that'd be absolutely fine. What else? What did the acronym stand? I don't actually know off the top of my head. Yeah, it's not. I'm not a big fan. What else? Right, guys. Questions on this section B. Any questions for particularly on the writing section, or no, not provocative, provocative that word was. I'll write it down for you. Provocative. That's where you say something that would provoke a response from a reader. Yeah? How many pages to aim for, Ishti? I can't answer that because different people have different handwriting. You will see that I did TRIBE. I did 5 paragraphs. They were all probably about half a page each, so that would have been about 3 pages probably on an exam script. But it's different from different people. If I had to give one top tip before the exam, what would it be? My top tip would be to remember that you've spent at least 2 years preparing all of these things. It's not the revision that you've just done now. It's not the revision you've just done with me. It's the last 2 years that you can capitalize on in the exam. So try and take it as an opportunity to show off all the stuff that you've learned. Compare yourself back to how you were in like year 7. And lots of you might have kind of only joined the only arrived in the country or started speaking the language in the last few years. Think about the progress you've made and see this as an opportunity to show off. So that would be my biggest piece of advice in terms of mindset. In terms of actual planning, I would just scribble. I would scribble my acronyms on the side. I would make sure that I plan, particularly the writing question. That's what I'd be aiming for. Let's have a look. How do you use bracket dashes? The same way you'd use brackets. So you would say, so if I were to write a sentence, I might say, he looked at me, dash, I kid you not, like I was a stranger. Okay, so notice that these dashes here are functioning just the same as brackets. So you do parenthetical dashes in the same way you do actual parentheses or brackets. Okay. Let's see what other questions there are. How many paragraphs should you aim for question 5? I think 5 paragraphs, if they're detailed enough, is usually enough. Would I recommend DAFORES? So as I said earlier, that particular acronym is only relevant if you're trying to persuade your writer, so your reader rather. So if you look in the wording of the question, if it says to persuade or to convince or to argue, then yeah, use that. It's a really great acronym for ticking things off. What's my surname? Can't answer that one. What happens if you fail English language? So the law states that with English language, you have to be in education, English language education, until you're 18 or until you pass GCSE English language. So usually what that means is that if you are 16, you would have to resit it either in November or following June. And if you failed again, the following November and the following June, until you passed it or until you turned 18. That's what would happen if you failed. But that's not going to happen, Aman. It's not going to happen. Let's have a look. If I were to do section B first, should I read the extract beforehand? No, you wouldn't have to, because usually the question, even if it's slightly linked, you don't need it for answering the writing bit. Jasmine, is a conversational tone better to use than serious? My teacher told us not to be too serious or patronizing because it sounds too shouty. Yeah, it's a great question, Jasmine. It goes back to gasp. So if you look at the gasp bit, if the purpose is to persuade, then you probably would want to be quite formal. However, if the purpose is to inform, then you could potentially be a little bit more informal, or vice versa, like based on the purpose, but also the audience. If your audience is like your peers, people of your age, you would be more conversational than serious. Whereas if it's for adults, particularly professional adults in a certain area, then you probably want to be more serious and formal. So look at the gasp, how the question is structured in terms of the purpose and the audience, and that should allow you to answer that question a bit better. Okay. Let's see, what else have I missed? I am trying to do as many of these questions as possible, you guys. What if passed literature? If you pass literature, do you still have to retake language if you fail it? Yeah. Sadly, it's English language that you have to pass rather than English literature, in order to avoid resitting. How long to spend on each question? Once you've done your annotating and planning, I would do about 1 minute per mark. So you spend about 15 minutes annotating the two texts, like I went through at the start, and then you can do a minute per mark, and you should have enough time. Same thing at the end. If you spent 5 minutes on planning, then you've got 40 minutes for writing, etc. Okay, so it should make sense. What else? How to use a semicolon, Alex? I could spend hours answering this question, but the quickest answer to that question is if you were to use a full stop, you can use a semicolon. Okay, so a semicolon joins together two sentences that would make sense on their own, particularly if they are linked to one another. So the key thing with a semicolon is both sides of the semicolon have to make sense on their own. Okay. People talking about each other's abs, that's just kind of weird. Some people heading off. Sorry if I missed you if you're heading off. I'm trying to get through these questions. Holly, I think I've answered that question about how long to spend on each question. What else? So Elaine is saying for paper 1 question 5, she did a sort of story instead of the description of the picture. Doesn't matter much. I mean, to be honest, if you've got a person walking through the environment and you're describing the environment around them, then that's still a description, even if you've got movement, i.e. a bit of narrative, as long as most of the focus is on the surroundings, then you're all good, yeah. I can't do a 20 out of 40 example of a question 5 response, no, but you can find them on the AQA website. What else? Can I explain what GASP is? Yeah. So GASP, basically, every question 5 of every exam that you ever get will have the genre, which is the type of text. It will have an audience. Sorry, my pen is against me. Audience. It will have a subject, which is the thing you're writing about, and it will have a purpose, which is what you're trying to do with your piece of writing. If you can identify each of these things from the question, then when you plan, you can think, okay, what do I need to do for this form or genre? What do I need to appeal to this specific audience? What should I include about the subject named? And how am I going to achieve my purpose? So it's just a quick way of planning it out. Hopefully that answers your question. What else? Some people have got to go. Peace out. Have a wicked evening and good luck tomorrow if you've got to go. Some people are asking me about a run through of the differences, how to approach letter, speech, article, leaflet. Yeah, I can try and do that as quickly as possible. So letter, speech, article, leaflet. Yeah. Okay. So key thing, I know some people have asked about ambitious vocab as well. I have seen that now. I know people have posted it a couple of times, so just hold off on that one and I will answer it next. Guys, I literally have no idea what some of you are talking about with people protecting each other, but hey ho, whatever. So for a letter, key thing is you want to avoid, in fact, for a letter, I'm going to recommend that you go back to my recorded live stream from last week because the example that I did was a letter. So have a look at that example because I spent an hour just kind of answering the question. You see me typing it out live so you can see what I was thinking as I did it as well. So yeah, don't give the examiner a nickname and hope for extra marks. No. Speech. Sorry. The letter, I would have a look at that one. For a speech, the way of putting it together, always have a greeting, always state your purpose at the beginning. So I always call it like a mission statement. Then you go straight into basically a similar structure to what we've done now. So I'd have a combination of small picture and big picture. So here is like a small localized example of the issue I'm talking about. And here's how it relates to the great wide world. So small picture, big picture, and I would also, when you're doing the big picture, that's when you bring in your stats. And at the end, I would try and make sure that you have a call to action, or basically an entreaty to your audience. What do you want them to do? What do you want them to take away from your speech? What do you want them to have learnt? What do you want them to think about? What do you want them to do from your persuasive speech? Okay, and you can slot in your A forest as you go. For an article, just talked you through that one. I would use the structure that I did. I like the tribe structure. I also like the epic structure that someone mentioned before. Does the same thing. For a leaflet, um, leaflets are quite hard. I don't think they're likely to come up. They very rarely do. But essentially, with a leaflet, it's very similar to an article. Except it's usually focused on informing rather than kind of arguing. So you wouldn't have so many of the persuasive rhetorical techniques. You wouldn't have emotive language in there. It would be much more kind of like clear, precise, instructive, high register language, basically. Hopefully that answers that question. I had to do it briefly because obviously we're running out of time, but hopefully that's a quick overview of how we have them differently. Ambitious vocabulary. Sing. It's such a hard question to answer. I'm going to tell you what, I am going to put in a couple of, I'm just going to have on my screen, I'm just going to throw in a couple of cool words. So I'm going to have turgid. Turgid means like slow or difficult. I'm going to have the word retrospect, which is looking back at the past. I'm going to have the word incipient, which is like a bud, something brand new. Something incipient is something just beginning. The same burgeoning means the same thing, or budding. And these are really relevant for when you're talking about like an idea. So an incipient idea is one that is brand new. A burgeoning idea, something which is growing. Budding, it's just turning into something. Okay. So there's a few bits of vocab for that. These are completely randomly off the top of my head. I might have percolate. If something percolates, technically it's what you do to coffee when it's like brewing. But if you let something percolate, you let it kind of brew in your mind before you come out with an idea. What else? Tacit I used earlier, which I think is a really good one. It means unspoken. So a tacit endorsement was the phrase that I used. Hopefully that's enough to get you started. So I've given you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bits of key vocab at your request. Sing. Hopefully that helps you out there. Okay, let's see what else we've got. James, what word did you say to use instead of sincerely? So for sincerely is if you know someone at the end of a letter. Faithfully is if you don't know someone at the end of a letter. Okay. No worries, Sing, you're welcome. For question 2, do you only need one inference per quote? Yes. Yep, and you don't need to zoom in on language, literally just an inference from the quote and then move on to the other text. Zara, can you do really well on AO6 but okay on AO5 for question 5? Yes. You can, however, there aren't as many marks for AO6. So if you're going to bank on something, I would bank on AO5 rather than AO6. You're more likely to do really well on AO5 and bomb on AO6, and it matters less because there are more marks available for AO5. So can you repeat the same ideas for question 4 and question 2? Only if the question asks you for the same things. So for this one, question 2 was asking about the different experiences, whereas the question 4 was asking about different attitudes, but they both mentioned eating sweets. Yeah. Okay. So as requested earlier, if you could either click on the link that Reese has just shared in the chat, or you can scan the QR code if you have access to. It would be absolutely wonderful if you could leave us a review of the cram courses, of this cram course, if this is the only one you've attended, any of the other cram courses you've attended with me or any of the other My Ed Space teachers. That would be absolutely wonderful. I'd really, really appreciate it. Let's try and get up to 300 reviews. That'd be absolutely wonderful. Okay. So yeah, please do follow that link. It's been pinned to the top of the chat. That would be amazing. I'm going to carry on answering a few more questions. Louis Thompson, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, mate. Thank you so much for coming. I really hope it was valuable. Yeah, do feel free to ask more questions. I haven't finished. Do feel free to ask. So Sadia's got one question. Throw it at me. That's absolutely fine. There is also a survey. If you want to complete that, it would be really useful to us as well, just so we get some feedback on how to do things better every time. I'm still answering questions though. If you're still here, keep on asking the questions, and I will answer them. But for those of you who are going, see you soon. Good luck in tomorrow's exam. So what's the difference between paper 2 question 3 and paper 1 question 2? There's really not much difference at all, apart from the fact that paper 2 is a non-fiction extract, which means that you're less likely to be able to comment on the kind of the narrative structure of sort of like the narrative devices. But other than that, it's basically the exact same thing. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys, for your reviews and for all the love that you're sharing. You're amazing. Thank you so much for coming. Vault Dev, no, we're not finishing yet. Some people are just leaving because they haven't got any more questions to ask. But I'm going to continue answering questions until 8 or until the questions run out. So no, we're not necessarily finishing. Love my channel content. Thanks, Kate. Predictions on what question 5 will be on. Oh, so difficult. I have no idea because it could literally be anything. There's no prediction that teachers or examiners can really make because they can literally be on anything. All I will say is they have to be on something that the exam boards think are relevant to young people. So they often ask things about, like school, like the education system and homework and uniform and learning. They will often talk about like family life. They will often talk about growing up. All that kind of stuff will come up, but there's no way of predicting what the actual topic will be. CFK, I really like that sentence you included, by the way. I've just managed to read it. That would definitely work for that question we just did. And goodbye to you. Zara bids me farewell. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to have you as well. Do we do English A-level courses? Unfortunately, we don't yet. It's something I would really like to offer in future, though. So do feel free to inquire about it so you can be put on the wait list. Elaine, what's AO5? AO5 is it's basically writing something compelling and amending things for your specific form, purpose, and audience. And then AO6 is like spelling, punctuation, and grammar, ambitious vocabulary, paragraphing, all the technical stuff. Okay. Jasmine, thank you so much for everything, sir. It's not often you find a teacher who explains so well, yet never complains about explaining the same thing 100 times over. Lols. Thank you so much, Jasmine. That's really kind. I'm touched. It's been really great to have you here. Thank you for attending so many of the sessions and for contributing so well. That was awesome. Loads of people wishing people good luck. That's great. Sadia is saying, my teacher said they give you 4 more marks on question 3 because there are no bullet points and no box of the lines compared to paper 1 question 2. The bullet points are always pretty useless anyway, to be honest. I'm not quite sure what you mean by what your teacher's saying there, but it might well be true. But the actual what you do, it's exactly the same. What's an adjective? Misty, an adjective is a word that modifies a noun, so usually a describing word. What else? Any more questions? Thank you for the reviews that people have been mentioning. Thank you, Sing, or aka Skibbity. Appreciate that. Um, how would you recommend to lay out the positives and negatives for comparing the two texts? Well, it's not always going to ask you for positives and negatives. If it doesn't talk about positives and negatives, then I wouldn't do that. Or do you mean similarities and differences? Because it's only going to ask you to do one or the other for question 2. Cheers again, sir. Top lad. Thank you, Soapman. Much appreciated. You are also top lad. Sadia, what's the difference in tone between a speech and a letter? Well, the tone is going to be, for a speech, it's going to be slightly more informal because you're directly addressing the audience who are right there, whereas letters tend to be more formal. So the register is going to be kind of the key difference in the tone there. One will be more conversational, one will be more serious. What rhetorical devices do I recommend for question 5? If the question asks for rhetorical things, i.e. if it asks you to be persuasive, rhetorical questions are always good banker. Statistics, you're always going to need them whether the writing is persuasive or argumentative or informative, so that's another big banker. I also really like having a question that's then answered. There is a Greek name for that, but just ask a question, then answer it. And I also really like the like a cluster of 3 type thing, and you don't have to just use it with like 3 adjectives or 3 nouns. You can literally do like three clauses with a semicolon, and I think it's really powerful, particularly if you use anaphora in them as well. So that's like a little stack that I really enjoy. What was satire? Asking me what an adjective was? Ah, fair enough. Cool. Well, hopefully someone benefited from it. I can't seem to be able to scroll on my my chat right now. Let's see. Yeah, I've lost the ability to refresh my chat. So hopefully the questions are over there. The last question I can see is from Meow Mia asking about rhetorical devices, which I just answered. I can't see any more of the questions. Oh, they've refreshed. Sadia, if you're doing an argument persuade for a letter, then how can you formally write that? You can still be, in fact, I think formal persuasion is some of the best stuff because you can be really sassy and catty with your language whilst also being really like highbrow with the register and details. Yeah. Guys, why are we comparing broceps? Do we have any tips for question 3, finding analysis techniques? Because sometimes they give a really dry text with little to no techniques. Yeah, if the text is really dry, then instead of focusing on techniques that are used, focus on linguistic choices, so like individual words that you zoom in on. So if you've quoted something which is relatively dry, you kind of analyzed it, zoom in on a specific word and go, the linguistic choice of the verb sitting gives the impression. So that way you can still use terminology and you can zoom in closely on language and you can get away with the fact that the text isn't necessarily that interesting. Hopefully that answers your question, Skeps. What else? Is that all of them? I think that's all the question. Maya, how would you lay out the comparison question? So if you have a look in the workbook at the provided example, the paragraphs just go synthesis, which is where here is the difference between the attitudes of the 2 writers. Then I analyze the first extract, I link it with something like conversely, and then I analyze the second one, and it's done. Okay, so that's my overall kind of structure for the comparison, Maya. An example of how to use a colon. To be honest, colons are best when they're introducing kind of like a list. Just introduce a list. So you could say something like this includes colon rice, butter, and heroic antics. Okay, obviously that sentence is nonsense. It's supposed to be, but you have your colon to introduce a list of things, and hopefully that's the easiest way to use colons is to just introduce a short list of something. There are other uses of colons, but I'd take about 10 minutes just explaining it. Okay, so hopefully that's everything, which usually appears in writing. Of those options, A ultimate, any one of them can appear, but most often you have a speech or a letter, then article, then leaflet in terms of frequency. But like I said, you can't predict exactly what's going to come up. John Catherine Etherton, not sure whether you should do question 5 first or last. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I always recommend doing it in the order that it comes up in the exam. But there's nothing wrong with doing it first. Do what you've done in your mocks and what you've done in previous ones. Don't come up with a brand new approach the night before an exam. Do what works well and make little tweaks based on feedback that you've had. Sadia, can I give an example of formal persuasion? Yes. So something like my formal language would be something like if one were to consider the abundance of previous correspondence from this address, it would become irrefutably clear that there has been a grand oversight on the part of the reading party. Okay, so what I've done there is I've sassed my person by like persuading them that they've missed something here, but I've also used very high elevated formal register. Okay. Nice one, John. Yeah, cool. Right, guys, the questions are starting to dry up, so I'm going to call it a night there. I need to go home and have my dinner. You guys need to relax the night before this final English exam. Thank you so much for coming. You guys have been amazing tonight, even with the absurd banter that you've been sharing with each other. Your points have been fantastic. So thank you so much. Like I said, if you've got time and you've enjoyed these sessions or found them beneficial, please do write us a review on Trustpilot. There is also a survey that would be really great if you could fill in. That's it, you guys. If you have any further questions that I haven't been able to answer on here, I am going to be on my TikTok later. So if you just want to comment on one that seems relevant, I'll try and type you a little quick response. Okay, here to help. Really, really hope that you do amazingly well tomorrow. And yeah, it's going to be a pleasure hearing how you guys all do in a couple of months' time. So peace out, you guys. Have a wonderful, restful evening and smash it tomorrow like I know you will.